A little girl in an oversized jumpsuit marches into the top floor of Bennett Tower. She has not lost, she is here to save her grandmother's job. In the next 10 minutes, an empire will pause, a guarded billionaire will thaw, and a family's future will hang on a child's unshakable determination. Keep watching to see how one tiny act of love sparks a life-changing chain reaction. Charles Bennett had always thought of Monday mornings as the runway to the rest of his week, smooth, predictable, and lined with green-lit approvals. At 66, the widowed CEO of Bennett Industrial Holdings knew the rhythm of his empire the way a lifelong pianist knows a sonata. Coffee at 6, driver at 6:30, elevator doors gliding open on the 49th floor at 6:55 sharp. From their financial briefs, department dashboards, and an executive staff that parted before him like a well-rehearsed choir. Yet on this particular Monday, the melody stumbled. His leather shoes had barely crossed the threshold of the executive suite when he noticed the hush, a palpable shift in air pressure that made even the fluorescent lights feel dimmer. Along the corridor of frosted glass offices, assistants paused mid-keystroke, eyes widening toward the reception area. "That's odd," Charles muttered, slipping his phone back into the pocket of his tailored blazer. He cleared his throat and forced a reassuring smile toward his staff. If something was amiss, the conductor mustn't falter. At the center of the hush stood a child, a little girl, no taller than his desk, wearing what could only be described as a janitor's jumpsuit rolled and cinched in imaginative ways. The sleeves were cuffed so many times they resembled plush donuts. The pant legs were tied with bright pink ribbons just above multicolored sneakers scuffed at the toes. In one hand she gripped a small spray bottle, in the other, an oversized feather duster drooped like a tired peacock tail. She was 7, maybe 8, yet her back was Caro straight, chin lifted with the earnest authority of someone on an urgent mission. Chestnut curls sprung from beneath a cap slightly too large, and on the brim, in faded marker, was written a single name: Grace. Charles exchanged a glance with his chief of staff, Margaret, a silver-haired stern pragmatist who had shepherded his calendar and sometimes his sanity for 2 decades. She raised a brow that said, "Dante, look at me. She is not on the schedule." He knelt, ignoring the mild protest of aging knees. "Well, good morning. Young lady, did you misplace someone?" Big hazel eyes blinked up at him, bright yet laced with nerves. "Good morning, sir. I am Lily Rose Carter." She pronounced each syllable like it might be graded later. "I am here to work for my grandma. She couldn't make it." The childish declaration ricocheted around the marble lobby. A courier paused mid-step. An accountant peeked from behind a latte foam mustache. Somewhere, a phone chimed its calendar reminder and was swiftly silenced. Charles softened his tone, conscious of the many ears now tuned in. "Your grandma, would that be Grace Carter, from night maintenance?" Lily's eyes lit. "Yes, that is her. She isn't feeling well. And grandma says a Carter never lets the team down." The sentence wobbled at the end, as though she were imitating adult resolve but standing on tiptoe to reach it. Margaret hovered, clipboard clutched like a shield. "Mr. Bennett, we have the quarterly forecast in 10 minutes. He didn't break eye contact with Lily. Something gentle but insistent tugged inside his chest. The same feeling he'd had the first time he'd coached his late wife through a bout of morning sickness decades prior, an instinct older than spreadsheets. He rose and addressed the lobby gently. "Let us give Miss Carter a moment. Everyone, forecast can wait." The staff, trained to obey, dispersed with reluctant curiosity. Charles guided Lily toward the glass doors of his office, doors so pristine that visitors often missed them completely. He waved his hand, the sensor clicked, and the panels parted like pages of a secret book. "Come in, Lily Rose. We'll see about getting you settled." He offered a reassuring smile, though the question marks in his mind jostled like ping-pong balls. Inside, his office stretched wall to wall with Chicago's skyline view, steel, snow-dusted rooftops, and the river carving frosty ribbons among them. Lily paused at the threshold, eyes widening at the horizon before ducking her head, as though grandeur were something to tiptoe around. "Pretty high up, ain't it?" Charles remarked. She nodded, gaze tilting toward the clouds. "Feels like heaven could be right outside the window." The poetic answer surprised him. He gestured to a leather guest chair. "Why don't we start with you sitting down?" She perched on the edge, feet swinging miles from the carpet. Charles rounded his desk, but forwent the throne-like CEO chair. Instead, he grabbed a side chair so their eyes were level. An act Margaret would later describe as utterly off-put. "Tell me what happened with your grandmother." Lily clasped the spray bottle on her lap. "Grandma Grace woke up coughing last night. She said it was just the weather, but after her shift she could hardly talk. This morning she told me she might need to see a doctor." Her lower lip trembled, then composed itself. Small soldiers were grouping. "She said she couldn't miss another night or they'd have to let her go. Rent is due Friday." Charles exhaled slowly, hard hitching on the word rent. He'd once known that edge-off-the-cliff feeling before his company balances dwarfed national budgets. "So you put on her uniform and came here?" Lily nodded. "I know the floor she cleans, and I know how to mop nice. Grandma showed me after school sometimes." She looked down at her sneakers, suddenly shy. "I am small, but I can do big jobs. Something warm and dangerously unbusiness-like flooded Charles's sternum. He pressed a discreet button on his watch. Moments later, Margaret reappeared. Yes, sir. Please call building services. Have them send interim staff for Ms. Carter's shift tonight fully paid, and arrange for a basket soups, teas, the whole holistic bakery department to be couriered to her home address. Lily will provide it. Margaret's pen scribbled at lightning speed, and the forecast. Delay it an hour. Fortune 500 isn't he going anywhere. When the door shut again, Lily looked astonished. You don't have to do those things. Grandma said people are busy. He chuckled. Good business means taking care of the people who keep the lights on. He hesitated. Do you know your grandma's doctor? I have the card. She produced a dog-eared business card from her jumpsuit pocket. He inspected the name of a small community clinic across town, reliable but underfunded. His own physician's number nested in his phone felt, suddenly, like an unused privilege. He tapped the card on his knee. How about we get her seen by a specialist today? We have a company car downstairs. Lily's eyes grew. But I am supposed to work. You've done the most important work already, alerting me. He gestured to the phone on his desk. Let us call Grandma first so she knows where you are. The call rang only twice before a raspy voice answered. Hello? Charles switched to speaker so Lily could speak. Grandma, it's me. I am safe. I am with Mr. Bennett, the big boss. Grace coughed softly. Oh dear heavens, Lily, you didn't Charles leaned in. Mrs. Carter, Charles Bennett here. Your granddaughter is perfectly safe. And she has explained your situation. We'd like to send a car. Take you to Northwestern Memorial for a thorough checkup. No expense, of course. There was a stunned silence, then a fragile whisper. Mr. Bennett, I can let you. You've taken care of our building for 6 years. Allow me to return the favor. Grace's resistance crumbled into grateful tears. She agreed, and Charles arranged pickup in 20 minutes. When the call ended, Lily wiped the heel of her palm across damp lashes. Grandma always helps everyone. I was scared no one would help her. Charles offered her a monogrammed handkerchief. You two have clearly been helping the rest of us all along. The morning light painted gold on the skyline, reflecting across the glass walls of the office. In the hush, Charles felt the clock of his life tick in a new cadence, one not governed by a bidder but by the small heartbeat of purpose. He stood. How about breakfast? Executive kitchens make a legendary oatmeal. Lily giggled a tiny bell in the high island chamber. She hopped down, almost tripping on the cuffed jumpsuit before catching herself. Charles reflexively reached out, steadying her. Her fingers were chilled from the January air, yet a spark passed between the young hand and the old as if two timelines had briefly overlapped. They walked toward the private lounge adjacent to his office. On a silver cart steamed bowls of oatmeal studded with cranberries and pecans. Courtesy of Margaret as swift behind-the-scenes orchestration, Lily's eyes widened at the spread. But you waited until he nodded before lifting the spoon, a lesson in manners that told Charles volumes about Grace's upbringing. Mid-meal, Lily's gaze settled on a framed photograph on a sideboard. Is that your wife? She asked. Charles followed her sight. It was Elaine smiling from a beach chair, sun hat shadowing the freckles that once hypnotized him. He cleared his throat. Yes, Elaine passed 5 years ago. I am sorry. Lily's empathy felt weightier than her years. Mom says heaven is not far, just invisible. He blinked at the phrasing. Your mother sounds wise. Lily poked at a cranberry. Mom passed when I was 3. Drunk driver. The words slipped out with matter-of-fact clarity. Charles's chest tightened. A child weaving between griefs yet spinning hope. He recognized the alchemy only women like Grace could teach. I imagine she'd be proud of you, he said softly. She loved purple lilacs. Lily had it as though coloring in the memory. Then she looked up. I think your wife is proud of you too. You help people. Charles felt a prickle behind his eyes, surprise giving way to tender ache. I try. He rose and poured her a small mug of hot chocolate whipped with frothy peaks. To lilacs and legacies, he toasted. Lily tapped her oatmeal spoon to the mug with ceremonial seriousness. Outside the lounge, phones resumed their buzz, and the morning took shape again. But inside, time seemed to fold, an old man rediscovering gentleness beside a child too brave for her size. Margaret reappeared, visor flipped to the next emergency. Driver is downstairs with a wheelchair. Mrs. Carter has agreed to the hospital visit. Do you wish to accompany her? Charles glanced at Lily, her eyebrows lifted in hopeful question. Yes, he decided, I do. But sir, the forecast. He tucked napkin corners onto the tray. Numbers can wait. People cannot. 10 minutes later, they were in the private elevator. Charles punched G for garage. The car hummed downward, lights zipping past glass at vertigo speed. Lily craned to watch them. Feels like Willy Wonka's glass lift, she said. He chuckled. Let us hope no squirrels appear. In the garage, the company's black town car idled, driver in crisp suit. Charles opened the rear door, guiding Lily in first. He followed, ignoring the sensation of rules bending. EOs did not join maintenance staff to hospitals. But then lilies rarely sprouted through concrete either. The city flowed beyond tinted windows, familiar streets rendered new through Lily's commentary. That building has gargoyles. They re-funny, not scary. She pointed out murals. Buses, the river ice thinning in the late winter sun. At Grace's apartment, Charles insisted on retrieving her personally. Inside the modest second floor walk-up, the air smelled of cedar cleaner and lavender sachets. Grace sat bundled on a sofa, gray hair braided to keep off her temples. Upon seeing Lily, she mustered a smile that crashed into coughing fits. Charles offered a steady arm as they escorted her downstairs. The driver unfolded a wheelchair. Grace sank into it, embarrassed. "I am sorry to trouble you, Mr. Bennett." "Hardly," he reassured. "Consider this a field trip on company time." In the hospital reception, forms were whisked away faster than Grace could protest. Specialists arrived. Pulmonology, cardiology schedules miraculously cleared. When Grace submitted her insurance card, the administrator waved it off. "Mr. Bennett has arranged direct billing," she said. Grace turned, tears balancing on lashes. "Sir, you don't have to do this." "But I want to." Charles rested a hand atop the wheelchair handle. "You've carried this building on your shoulders. Let someone carry you for a change." Lily clasped her grandma's hand. "See, I told you. People help." Hours passed beneath the blue-white glow of hospital corridors. Test results eventually returned severe pneumonia, edging toward hospitalization if untreated. Grace's relief intermingled with fear sick pay would not stretch far. Charles preempted her worry. "We'll place you on full medical leave. Salary uninterrupted, non-negotiable." By late afternoon, Grace was transferred to a private room. Charles stepped outside to give nurse instructions and found Lily leaning against the hallway wall, exhaustion finally seeping through bravery. "Long day," he said. She nodded, rubbing her eyes. "I am okay." "What would your grandma normally do about dinner?" "Soup and tea with honey." He smiled. "Then soup it is." They took the elevator to the cafeteria. Charles picked up a tray and let Lily choose chicken noodle, bread roll, a cup of gelatin that wiggled like laughter. For himself, tomato basil and decaf coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Seated by a window overlooking ambulance bays, Lily slurped quietly. Charles watched a snowflake melt on the glass and thought of seasons, how winter eventually surrenders to spring without consulting ledgers. Lily finished the last noodles and sat back. "Grandma says you re-important. Are you?" He chuckled. "Depends who you ask. She says important people decide how other people live." He considered. "I suppose I do in some ways." She traced circles on the tabletop. "Then please decide good things." The simplicity dissolved any corporate armor left on him. "I will." Evening tiptoed in. Charles arranged for Margaret to send Grace's nightclothes and Lily a school backpack to the hospital. A guest suite at Bennett Tower, usually reserved for European partners, was prepared for Lily so she could rest while Grace stayed under observation. When Lily and Charles returned to the tower, the lobby staff greeted her by name. Someone had taped a paper star to the security desk. "Welcome, Lily Jr., hero of the day." Lily beamed. Charles's throat thickened. They rode the private elevator to the 35th floor guest suite. Inside, plush armchairs waited beside a window that kissed the skyline. On the bed lay a small stuffed llama wearing a Bennett Tower badge. A note: "Every hero deserves a sidekick." She hugged the llama fiercely. "Thank you." Charles checked the antique clock. 8:12 p.m. "You should get some sleep. School tomorrow." She hesitated. "Will Grandma be okay?" He knelt eye level again. "She is in the best hands. I'll check first thing and drive you to see her before class." Satisfied, Lily climbed into bed, boots dangling until he untied them. She burrowed under the quilt, llama tucked beneath her chin. As he dimmed the lamp, a whisper floated. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes. Thank you for helping my family." He swallowed. "You helped mine today too, Lily." "How?" "By reminding me why doors should always stay open." Her eyelids fluttered, like cavernous windows. He smiled softly. "Exactly." When her breathing slowed into steady waves, Charles lingered at the doorway. Beyond the glass wall, Chicago shimmered, each office light a tiny testimony of lives intertwining. He felt, for the first time in years, that the city's heartbeat matched his own. Back in his top-floor office, he sank into the CEO chair. Elaine had once giggled was too much thrown for one man. On his desk still sat the quarterly forecast. He pushed it aside. Instead, he opened a blank page on his tablet and began typing a new memo: Employee Wellness Initiative Phase 1. Even titans, he thought, need reminding that empires are built on caretakers. And sometimes the smallest caretaker must walk into an executive suite wearing a jumpsuit 5 sizes too big to deliver the message. As midnight swept over Bennett Tower, Charles saved the document, closed his eyes, and offered a silent prayer of thanks for Grace's recovery, for Lily's courage, and for the chance, at 66, to start conducting a new kind of sonata. Far below, maintenance staff buffed marble floors, unaware that tomorrow, every one of them would receive full health coverage upgrades. In the guest suite, Lily dreamed of purple lilacs blooming on skyscraper ledges. And in a quiet hospital room across town, Grace Carter slept, Eve dripping antibiotics into tired veins, unaware that destiny had pivoted. Morning would come with its usual emails and stock alerts, but the course was forever altered. All because an unexpected visitor had marched into an executive suite. daring to believe love could outweigh protocol and proving herself absolutely right. Room 512 smelled faintly of disinfectant and chamomile tea bags someone had taped to the event Grace Carter's own homespun trick to drown out the hospitalist's chemical tongue. Afternoon light filtered through slatted blinds, striping the white blanket that covered her legs. On the coverbed table sat a vase of grocery store carnations, a half-eaten cup of lemon gelatin, and an old leather stationery set she hadn't opened in years. The nurse had encouraged rest, but rest was a stranger to Grace. Her body might be tethered by IV tubing and pulse ox wires, yet her mind was busy, skittering across decades like a stone skipping water. Pneumonia, the doctors called it, a nasty case, a couple of nights under close watch, a pharmacy's worth of antibiotics, then fingers crossed home. That's what they assured her. But illness always carried whispers of what if, and in those whispers Grace heard unfinished sentences. She'd learned, in 65 years of life, that unanswered words could weigh more than any mop bucket. So, while the corridor hummed with rolling carts and distant monitor alarms, Grace unlasped the worn brass latch on her stationery case. Inside were envelopes the color of old bone and a fountain pen Charles Bennett had pressed into her hand that morning before leaving to drive Lily to school. "Write whatever you like," he said, and the softness in his eyes made her breath hitch harder than the pneumonia. Grace turned the pen between her fingers. Its weight grounded her, reminded her that even now, especially now, stories mattered. She drew a deep, cautious breath, unapped the pen, and began her first letter. Dear Lily Rose, if Grandma's handwriting looks shaky, blame this wobbly table, not my heart. My heart is steady and full of you. When you came into my room last night in that superhero t-shirt, I felt stronger before the IV even dripped twice. Your smile does that, turns medicine into moonlight. I need you to know something important. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It is sweeping a 62nd floor at midnight while your knees creak and still humming You Are My Sunshine. That's what you've shown me by taking my place yesterday. I am proud enough to burst, though the nurses say bursting is poor form. Remember our secret promise? We said we'd collect 3 good things each day. My 3 today: 1, the nurse with pink sneakers who braids my hair so the tangles won't win. 2, the way Mr. Bennett ratcheted my old recliner until it leaned just right for window sunsets. 3, you skipping into the room, telling me you've seen clouds shaped like spoonfuls of mashed potatoes. Keep collecting, my sweet girl. Pockets full of good things weigh nothing at all. Love, Grandma Grace. She folded the page, slid it into an envelope, and wrote open after brushing teeth on the front. Lily loved little games like that. Grace pictured Charles sighing in mock exasperation as Lily insisted on nighttime dental hygiene with military precision just to claim her prize letter. The thought warmed her chest more effectively than the hospital-grade blanket. Grace set the envelope aside and stared at the ceiling tiles. One was discolored, a pale bruise where rain had likely seeped through the roof, then dried. Imperfection atop perfection, that was life. She unapped the pen again. Dear Madeleine, yes, I am writing to heaven because the mother's words find their children. Geography be damned. Sweet girl, it has been 4 years, 2 months, and some days I refuse to count. I still reach for my phone when Lily does something clever. Then I remember the driver was drunk, the road was slick, and my world slipped, it seems. You'd be relieved to know your daughter loves science projects. She makes baking soda volcanoes that rival Yellowstone. She says she wants to be an inventor who fixes things before they break. Imagine that, an 8-year-old ready to save the world from entropy. We refine mostly. We scrape, we scrapbook, we sew basil on the windowsill. But pneumonia reminds me how fragile the scaffolding is. I am trying to be here as long as Lily needs me. Still, just in case, tuck an angel feather into her backpack when she isn't looking. Will you? And whisper in her dreams that she'll always be enough. Love you beyond the horizon. Mom. Tears slid, spotting the parchment. Grace dabbed them away, though the ink ran a little like watercolors gone rogue. She didn't mind. Love was never a tidy medium. The hallway door nudged open. Nurse Tiffany, the one with the pink sneakers, poked her head in. Letter writing marathon, she teased, checking the F pump. Relay race, Grace answered. I am passing batons to tomorrow. Tiffany smiled. Vitals are stable. Good sign. Keep that pen moving. It is aerobic exercise for the spirit. She adjusted the flow rate, then left with a wink. Grace flexed her fingers. 1 more letter, she told herself, and then maybe a nap. She hesitated before choosing the next blank sheet. Words for Charles felt weightier. Tricky, he was her boss, that alone complicated gratitude, yet he had shepherded her to safety. shielded Lily, and done it with a tenderness that felt personal, not corporate. She inhaled the smell of chamomile soothing frayed nerves, and put pen to paper. Mr. Bennett Charles, there is a saying some doors stay shut because the wind outside is too wild. Yesterday, you opened a door no one else had noticed, and a gale of kindness rushed in. I'm still catching my breath. I've spent much of my life invisible on purpose, better to mop quietly than invite scrutiny. But you saw Lily, then saw me, and decided both were worth slowing their empire for. I don't know the language of boardrooms, so I'll say a plain thank you for treating us like we matter. I'll warn you, Lily attaches like ivy. She'll climb your skyscraper heart before you realize it. Covering steel with green life, let her, buildings where ivy well. When I am back on my feet, I'd like to repay you not with anything grand. Just a home-cooked supper, chicken pot pie, maybe in peach cobbler if peaches behave this season. Consider this an IOU for nourishment beyond what money buys. With gratitude and a mop waiting for me. Grace Carter. She sealed the envelope but kept it unaddressed. Something told her timing mattered. Charles Bennett was powerful yet also precariously human. She'd watch for the right moment. A yawn crept up. Grace capped the pen, slid the stationery aside, and eased the recliner back until she could study the sunset turning the window less coral. Just as her eyelids drooped, her phone buzzed a text from Margaret, the CEO's famously no-nonsense chief of staff. Grace, afternoon update. Lily aced her spelling quiz words: courageous, vacuum, skyscraper, dinner planned at Tower Cafe. Charles will bring her by at 6 to say goodnight. Rest easy. Grace smiled at the thought of Charles navigating flashcards with Lily. Corporate titan by day, spelling bee coach by evening. Life has plot twists indeed. She drifted into sleep. She dreamed of soap bubbles turning into clouds, floating toward a ceiling that lifted away, revealing an indigo sky. In the dream she was young again, dancing barefoot on a rooftop while her late husband, Samuel, strummed guitar. Lily laughed somewhere near, a silver bell echoing. Then a sudden cough, a ragged bark jarred her awake. Her ribs flared with ache. She pressed the call button. A nurse delivered a cup of warm water and reminded her to use the incentive spirometer. Blowing into the plastic device felt like puffing air into a stubborn balloon. Pain glanced her side, but she persevered. Each breath drew tomorrow closer. A knock preceded a familiar voice. Permission to enter. Charles stepped in. Gray suit exchanged for a charcoal sweater. Lily beside him swinging a stuffed llama by the leg. Grandma, Lily squealed, climbing carefully onto the side of the bed. Gray smoothed the girl's curls, noticing a new lilac-shaped barrette. Where do you find that pretty clip? Mr. Bennett took me to the gift shop. He said every inventor needs flair. Lily beamed, squeezing Charles's hand like they were co-conspirators. Grace's heart swelled. Well, you both made my day. Charles placed a takeout cup on the table. Cafe's finest ginger tea, extra honey. Grace accepted gratefully. Doctor's orders, liquids, and kindness. She eyed Lily. How was school? I told the class about white blood cells. Miss Hammond let me draw them on the board. They look like fluffy pancakes that fight germs, Lily announced. Grace laughed, the sound raspy but bright. Future scientist at work. Charles perched on the visitor chair, hands folded. The doctor says you're responding well. With luck, you'll swap of poles for mop handles before week's end. Grace eyed, half relief, half resignation. Can tea keep a Carter down for long? She glanced at Lily's drooping eyelids. Little miss, have you eaten? Chicken noodle and crackers, Lily recited. And a brownie, but it was kind of crumbly. A gourmet critique, no less, Charles said, chuckling. Grace gestured to her stationery. I was just writing letters. One for Lily, one for the archives. Her eyes flagged to Charles, but she didn't elaborate. Lily slid off the bed. Mr. Bennett said I can stay at the guest suite again, but I wanted to give you this first. She produced a folded note adorned with heart stickers. Grace opened it. Stick figure drawings of 3 people holding hands beneath a giant lilac bush. Grandma, Lily, and judging by the tall stick figure wearing a tie, Mr. Bennett. Above them, the words family helps. Moisture blurred Grace's vision. She looked at Charles, who seemed equally moved. I'll treasure this, she whispered. A nurse popped in to announce vital check time. Charles rose. We'll let them do their work. Lily, say good night. Good night, Grandma. 3 good things, Lily reminded, kissing her cheek before following Charles out, llama dragging. Grace watched them disappear down the corridor, silhouettes framed in sterile hallway light, and felt tides shifting, pulling separate lives toward a shared shoreline. Morning found Grace propped up, sunlight pouring liquid gold through the blinds. She reached for her pen again, not for letters now but for lists. Samuel had taught her the power of categorized hope. If you can name it, you can nurture it. Page title: Plans post pneumonia. 1. Teach Lily how to scramble eggs without burning the pan. 2. Donate extra blankets to the women as sheltered downtown. 3. Ask Charles if Bennett Tower recycles properly on lower levels. Custodial staff had complaints. 4. Start a rooftop lilac garden if city codes allow. She paused, pen hovering. Item 5 felt audacious but truthful. 5. Accept help without apologizing. Grace underlined it twice. A gentle knock preceded Dr. Ahmad, the lead pulmonologist, rolling in on a stool. Good news, Ms. Carter. Your latest X-ray shows significant clearing. If oxygen saturation remains stable, we'll discharge you tomorrow evening. Grace exhaled relief. Thank you, doctor. He reviewed her chart, then tapped his pen thoughtfully. You have solid support. More than I expected. He smiled. Let them lift you. Healing isn't a solo sport. When he left, Grace reached for the envelope addressed to Lily. She added a P.S. Today is 3 good things: 1 clear lungs, 2 friends in unlikely suits, 3 tomorrow as promise. Mid-afternoon, Margaret arrived with a tablet so Grace could FaceTime the custodial team. They depooled vacation hours to cover her absence and wanted her blessing. Tears turned into laughter as jokes flew. Dante rushed back. We've commandeered your secret snack drawer. Grace ended the call humbled. People did notice after all. Evening shadows lengthened when Charles returned, solo this time. Lily was with Nurse Tiffany decorating pre-made cookies at the nurse's station. Charles sat, hands threaded. How are you really? Grateful, she answered. A bit unsteady inside, she chose her words. I wrote a letter for you. He accepted the envelope, but didn't he open it? May I read it later? Of course. He rested the envelope over his heart pocket. Grace, I've been reviewing company policy. Maintenance staff accrues 12 sick days a year. That 1 T cut it. We re-expanding to unlimited paid medical leave for critical care, effective immediately across all departments. Grace's eyes widened. Charles, that's necessary. He lifted a hand. It took your pneumonia for me to notice cracks in the foundation. Emotion clogged her throat. You read changing lives. So did you long before me, he replied softly. I ran some numbers. The company can absorb the cost easily. Investors might grumble, but they'll survive. He chuckled. They always do. Grace thought of item 5 on her list: accept help without apologizing. She nodded. Thank you. He leaned closer. I also contacted the city about rooftop gardens. Zoning codes permit planters up to 30 inches deep. I took the liberty of ordering lilac saplings. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. You remembered. Lily told me they were her mother's favorite. I thought the view from the 49th floor could use some purple. Silence settled, not awkward but profound. 2 lives, 1 wealthy, 1 worn, finding symmetry in shared soil. Grace exhaled shackily. Samuel used to say, love us in the details. Charles's voice was barely a whisper. Your husband was a wise man. They remained like that until Lily bounded in, frosting on her cheeks, announcing a cookie emergency only Grandma's taste buds could resolve. Laughter filled the room, and the hospital walls no longer felt sterile. They felt like thresholds. Later, when the visitors had gone and the unit dimmed for night, Grace clicked on the bedside lamp and unfolded her post-pneumonia list. She added a final line. 6. Trust the unexpected visitor who opens doors. She smiled, slid the list into her stationery case, and shut her eyes. Machines beeped, nurses whispered, and somewhere down the hall, a lullaby played from a maternity suite. Life leaving life, entering an endless loop. Grace Carter slept with the certainty that tomorrow she would step through a brand new doorway. Letters delivered, debts cancelled by kindness, lungs ready for lilac-scented air. And in the darkness, the chamomile filter fluttered, as if the room itself sighed with contentment, holding space for all the stories still to come. Grace Carter had spent most of her 65 years mastering the art of vanishing in plain sight. Long before she pushed mop buckets across Bennett Tower's glossy floors, she'd learned how to glide through rooms without rippling the air, how to be useful, polite, unmemorable. The world praised such talent in a janitor. No one ever stopped to wonder where the grace came from or how dearly it had been bought. But hidden histories have a way of catching the light, like dust motes swirling in a sunbeam. All it takes is one open window, one unexpected gust to reveal what has danced there all along. For Grace, that window opened the morning Charles Bennett walked into her modest apartment to escort her to the hospital. In the hush that followed Lily's excited chatter, he noticed things few had ever bothered to see: framed sketches layered behind coat hooks, a vintage violin case propped like a forgotten guest, and a single diploma Harper Conservatory of Music tucked among recipe clippings on the kitchen corkboard. He meant to be courteous, ushering her down the stairs before pneumonia stole more of her breath. But curiosity tugged at him. Still, corporate decorum prevailed, and he kept silent, telling himself there would be time later. Later arrived 3 days after Grace's discharge. She returned to Bennett Tower on light-duty doctor's orders, limiting her to administrative tasks until her lungs proved reliable. The directive felt like exile. She was a woman who measured worth in marble gleam and hallway shine. Ask her to sit at a desk, and she'd sooner mop a ceiling. Yet the guest services office on the 30th floor offered one consolation: its window overlooked a rooftop courtyard where lilac saplings now waited in planters, their branches trembling over the city like shy debutantes. That Monday afternoon, while Lily finished homework beside a pot of budding purple, Grace sorted supply invoices. A gentle knock drew her gaze to the doorway, where Charles Bennett stood holding 2 steaming cups. "Herbal tea," he said. "Dr. S. orders and Margaret S." She smiled, pushing back from the desk. "Margaret has you well trained." "I live in fear," he agreed, stepping inside. He handed her a cup with a file folder balanced on top. "Thought it might be nicer to sign forms here than in the basement office." Grace accepted the tea but eyed the folder. "Forms? Official notice of your temporary role change. Same pay, fewer stairs." He paused. "And a background check waiver." She blinked. "Waiver? Why waive it?" "Because I already did a different kind of check." He gestured toward the violin case leaning behind her chair, a relic she'd carried to every apartment but hadn't opened in years. "Harper Conservatory graduate, class of '79, violin performance, summa cum laude." That is not standard janitorial resume material. Color rushed to her cheeks. Old news. Good stories never expire. He placed the folder on the desk. "May I hear it?" Grace traced the lip of her cup. Memories flickered, concert halls humming with anticipation, calloused fingertips dancing on ebony fingerboards, applause that filled her lungs better than any antibiotic ever could. But there were other memories too, shadows that nipped at music as heels. She inhaled, the tea steam warming stiff sinuses. "All right," she said quietly, "but it is a long story." "I've rescheduled my afternoon," he replied, settling onto the visitor chair. "Consider me captive." It began, she told him, in a red-brick Chicago row house where a young girl named Grace Mitchell memorized Vivaldi solos by ear because sheet music was expensive and lessons even more so. Her father, a steel mill foreman, spent evenings reading the sports page aloud while her mother stitched gowns for wealthier families' daughters. Yet both parents understood that some conjures wouldn't be fed with bread alone. When 12-year-old Grace crafted a violin from a cigar box, fishing line, and pine wire scraps, her father pawned his grandfather's watch to buy her a real instrument, a battered, full-size Amati copy with a hairline crack near the chin rest. She practiced until fingers bled, rising at dawn to saw through scales before school. By 15, she'd won a state youth concerto competition. By 17, she'd earned a scholarship to Harper Conservatory, the Midwest's hallowed ground for classical training. There, under vaulted ceilings and portraits of composers who stared like disappointed uncles, Grace discovered 2 truths: talent opens doors, and poverty bars some of them shut again. Harper covered tuition, but room, board, and a violin upgrade fell on her shoulders. She braided hair in dorm bathrooms for spare change, tutored theory students, and played paid gigs, weddings, funerals, jazz brunches where guests requested something cheerful then ignored the music entirely. Love crashed into her second year like an unexpected symbol. Samuel Carter was a mechanical engineering major at Northwestern, volunteering with the conservatory stage crew for extra credit. He had a laugh that tumbled stones over water, and he treated every violinist like a headliner, even when stage lights failed and the audience was a scattering of bored patrons. They married under a weeping willow in Lincoln Park, 2 months after graduation. With the guest list split between musicians and machinists, Grace wore a thrift store lace dress Samuel retailed on his welding bench, and their honeymoon was a bus tour to Milwaukee's Art Museum, tickets won in a radio raffle. They planned a life where music and mechanics would dance in tandem. She would audition for orchestras. He would design wind turbine prototypes to fund her dream, and for a time, they did exactly that. Grace landed a seat with the Midwestern Chamber Ensemble, a modest group yet rich in soul. Samuel secured a junior engineer position at a renewable energy startup. Evenings found them in a tiny apartment above a bakery, lights twinkling over Lake Michigan, violin notes mingling with the smell of cinnamon bread cooling on racks below. Then phone calls began, the kind that come at dusk, cloaked in polite dread. Layoffs at Samuel's firm, grant funding evaporating, clients canceling, small companies die fast when investors take fright. Samuel spent months sending resumes, but the early '80s recession hung heavy. Meanwhile, the chamber ensemble merged with a larger orchestra that required relocations Grace couldn't afford. Her seat vanished. Bills arrived like marching soldiers: rent, utilities, medical for Samuel's stress-induced ulcers. Grace accepted freelance gigs to bridge gaps, teaching beginners in church basements, busking in subway tunnels where violin echoes cracked against graffiti. Pride roared at first, then quieted. Survival composed its own score. When Lily's mother, Madeleine, arrived 7 years into marriage, the world brightened. Samuel found factory work. Grace took janitorial shifts at night so she could cradle her infant by day. She discovered a strange harmony in waxing floors, the carrying motion reminiscent of bow strokes, the reflection of fluorescent lights on polished tile like footlights on a stage. She told herself artistry had simply changed uniforms. But tragedy played crescendos without consent. Samuel's commute home intersected an icy freight track one January evening when signal lights malfunctioned. The collision crushed steel and futures alike. Grace, widowed at 33, faced single motherhood with a violin, a funeral bill, and an infant who stared at her with Samuel's amber eyes. She sold the Amati copy to pay rent, kept the bow as keepsake, and stepped fully into night shift custodial work. Over years the bow gathered dust in the violin case. But Grace promised herself she'd reclaim melody once Madeleine was old enough to remember it. Life, however, extended further tests Madeleine's rebellious teen phase, a brief runaway stint, then the car crash that stole her altogether. Grief layered upon grief until silence felt safer than song. I didn't set out to banish, Grace confessed to Charles now, voice trembling. I just kept trimming dreams to fit circumstances until they were pocket-sized. Charles listened, hand steepled under his chin, face soft. Outside, wind rattled the window pane, as if the city itself leaned closer. Grace drew a breath. Maintenance work is honest. Floors don't judge sorrow. They only ask for polish. And Lily, she brought color back. I figured that was enough. But the violin? He asked gently. She glanced at the case behind her. Strings snapped years ago. Bridge warped. I tell myself music lives in memory. Charles stood, moved to the case, and knelt, mirroring the moment he first met Lily. May I? She nodded, pulse quickening. He opened the worn clasps. Inside lay the maple instrument. Varnished, dull but proud. A thin crack still ran from hole to chin rest like a tear that never healed. He lifted it with reverence, the way one lifts fragile history. This violin has fought harder battles than most executives I know, he murmured. Grace allowed a small laugh. It has retired. Maybe on hiatus, he countered. Carefully, he returned it to velvet lining. Do you still read music? Every note. Then lobby concert halls aren't the only venues in town. He gestured to the courtyard where lilac buds nodded. We could host recitals out there. Employee families, community schools. Imagine lunchtime sonatas drifting through open windows. Her throat tightened. Charles, I haven't played in 25 years. Talent doesn't evaporate. It idles, he said. Let me have our instrument restoration vendor examine this. Just an assessment. Emotion stung her eyes. Why are you doing this? He met her gaze. Because you spent decades polishing other people's reflections. It is time we polish yours. Silence bloomed, fragrant as unseen lilacs. Grace set her tea down, hand shaking, and covered her face. For a moment tears slipped between fingers. Grief, gratitude, terror of hope. Charles let the moment breathe. When she looked up, she wiped cheeks with her sleeve. If the violin can be fixed, maybe I'll play for Lily. One lullaby just to prove I can still pull a bow. He smiled. Start there. Word of Grace's hidden past traveled faster than corporate memos. Within days, maintenance staff greeted her with mock formal bows. Maestro Carter, the Ver director, requested permission to feature her story in an internal newsletter, and the company's social impact team floated ideas about lunchtime concerts for charity. Grace, mortified, tried to decline, but Lily's gleeful insistence, Grandma, you'll be famous, wore down resistance. Meanwhile, Charles commissioned master luthier Jorge Martinez, whose studio smelled of sawdust and Renaissance, to restore the Amati copy. Jorge traced the crack, tapped wood grain, and pronounced it a survivor worthy of encore. She wants to sing again, he said, as though the violin were a patient clearing its throat. He replaced the bridge, reset the sound post, and strung new dominant strings with pegs that turned like softened butter. On a cool April evening, Charles invited Grace to the rooftop courtyard. Lilac saplings dotted the perimeter, leaves unfurling neon green under fairy light strands. The skyline blushed pink below, traffic hummed like an orchestra tuning. Lily bounced on her toes. Margaret, ever the conductor of events, stood ready with a camera under strict orders, only family photos. Grace had insisted. Jorge presented the restored violin in a simple black case. Grace's breath caught as she lifted it, fingertips recognizing the curve like an old friend's face. The weight felt the same, perhaps lighter. As if memory shed kilograms when forgiven, she tightened the bow, drew rosin across horsehair, and positioned chin to rest. A hush fell, broken only by city wind. Lily's eyes shone. Charles folded arms, guarding an uncharacteristically vulnerable heart. Grace closed her eyes and began. The opening bars of meditation from ties floated into dusk, notes so pure they seemed to hover midair, reluctant to descend. Her fingers, arthritic from years of bleach bottles, found muscle memory, her bow carved arcs of longing and release. Smog muted nearby honks, but nothing could mute that melody. Office workers on surrounding floors froze at windows. Mouths parted. A cluster of custodians on break leaned over railings. Cell phones unnoticed in pockets. Chicago's hum softened, as though the city pressed a stethoscope to its own chest to listen harder. By the final high harmonic, Grace's vision blurred. She let the last vibration linger. Bow suspended. When silence reclaimed the roof, applause erupted, small at first, then thunderous as more employees spilled onto balconies. Lily flung herself into Grace's arms. Squealing, Margaret dabbed eyes behind the camera. Even Jorge, accustomed to virtuosos, clapped with artisan pride. Charles stepped forward, voice hoarse. You never vanished, Grace. You were just waiting for the right echo. She laughed through tears. All these years I feared my music was lost. It was simply on the night shift, he said. The rooftop lights flacked on, painting everyone in warm glow. Someone from finance produced a thermos of hot chocolate. Another employee brought shortbread. A spontaneous gathering formed, executives mingling with maintenance. Accountants with security guards, all woven together by strings vibrating at 440 Hz. Labels dissolved, humanity stood bare in lilac-scented air. Later, when the crowd dispersed and city lights flickered like distant campfires, Charles walked Grace and Lily to the elevator. Grace rattled the violin case. A phoenix reborn. Lily hummed bits of the melody, inventing words about purple flowers and skyscraper stars. As doors slid shut, Grace turned to Charles. Thank you for seeing me. He met her gaze. Thank you for letting me. The elevator descended, but their spirit soared, proof that hidden pasts, once aired, can draft powerful futures. That night, alone in her apartment, Grace placed the violin on a kitchen table beneath the conservatory diploma. She brewed chamomile tea, inhaled, and felt lungs expand without pain. A quote Samuel once carved into her music stand resurfaced. The rest is not silence. It is anticipation. She opened her journal and added to the post-pneumonia list. 7 audition for community orchestra summer session. Below that she penned a new item. 8 teach Lily the difference between polishing floors and dimming oneself. One shines the world, the other dims it. Never confuse the two. Ink dried, tea cooled, moonlight poured through curtains. Somewhere inside Bennett Tower, janitors pushed sweepers across midnight halls, and the CEO pored over fiscal plans that now included arts grants. Across those miles of marble and dreams, a single truth connected every corridor. Hidden pasts, once illuminated, guide everyone forward. Grace closed her journal, touched the violin case, and whispered, Samuel, we re back in tune. Outside, the city trumpet of sirens and subway rumbles modulated to a softer key, as though recognizing a new player in the symphony. And in a sunroom 2 floors below, Lily slept curled under a quilt, a crayon sketch of her grandma on stage clutched in her fist, the next movement already composing itself in her dreams. Charles Bennett always believed life granted only one great love. After Elena's passing, he relegated himself to decades of dutiful solitude, convinced that the empty side of the bed was his final inheritance. Yet Lily Carter's laughter echoing through Bennett Tower and Grace Carter's violin singing sunsets into being had begun to rewrite that theorem. He found himself humming on the drive to work, slowing down at crosswalks to watch grandparents shepherd grandchildren, even leaving his phone face down during meetings. Heretical behavior for a man whose inbox ruled continents. Still, possibility is a fragile bloom. One harsh wind of doubt can snap the stem clean. And on a damp Thursday in May, the weather inside Charles' soul shifted violently. The day began with an email subject line: urgent board inquiry. Margaret delivered the printed copy to his desk as though it were a diagnosis. He skimmed the paragraphs, formal, bloodless. The Compensation Ethics Subcommittee wanted clarification about non-standard expenditures tied to wellness initiatives, rooftop gardens, and a mutual carts program that had not yet passed through budget committees. Translation: you recoloring outside the lines, Bennett. He set the letter down, jaw tight. He'd expected pushback. Bennett Industrial Holdings was publicly traded. Shareholders could stomach philanthropy so long as it fit within quarter-end slide decks. But a CEO diverting funds to restore dusty violins, plant lilacs, finance unlimited sick leave, such gestures carried no tidy ROI column and therefore, in boardroom terms, were liabilities. Margaret cleared her throat. They've scheduled an executive session next Monday. Closed doors. Charles nodded. Eyes still on the letter. Thank you. She lingered. We've faced worse. He offered a thin smile. Not since Elaine. Margaret's expression softened. She laid a hand on the back of his chair, a rare breach of professional distance, but said nothing. Sometimes silence carried farther than pep talks. When she left, Charles swiveled toward the wall of glass overlooking Chicago's river. Barges pushed against the current, taxis streamed like yellow blood cells through arteries of asphalt. Urban life marched on, indifferent. He thought of Grace polishing brass in the lobby as investors walked by, blind to her effort. He thought of Lily schooling him in cloud animals during lunch breaks. He thought of how Elena's final days had taught him the difference between existing and living, lessons he de-shelved in grief as dark closet-like sentimental sweaters. He dropped his forehead into his palm. Was he repeating a cycle, letting duty suffocate desire until desire fled? That afternoon, while Mumber's men run their hands over unauthorized line items, Charles slipped away. He texted Grace coffee at Grant Park, 20 minutes if free. Her reply arrived before he could lock his phone. Light duty. Remember, doctor says walks or therapy. Meet you by the fountain. A perverse thrill coursed through him as he informed Margaret he'd be off-site. Her eyebrows shot up, but she made no argument, proof she'd sensed this coming too. Rain glazed the sidewalks, turning the city into a watercolor. Charles' driver eased the car to the park's curb, but Charles waved him off. Take lunch, I'll walk back. His Italian loafers were no match for puddles, yet he didn't care. The air smelled of wet earth and tulips, May's confession of winter as defeat. Grace waited near the Buckingham fountain, lavender umbrella tilted like a bonnet. She wore a denim jacket over her custodial uniform, a concession to practicality, but with her silver braid and lilac scarf she looked equal parts artist and artisan. At her feet sat a violin case shielded by a plastic trash bag sleeve. You'll ruin your shoes, she called as he splashed toward her. They've never done anything useful anyway, he answered, breathless not from the jog but from seeing her. They settled on a bench under horse chestnut trees. The fountain's jets were off, but rainwater pooled in the basin, rippling at drops. Kisses. Grace produced 2 travel mugs. Cinnamon steam curled between them. What is the emergency, she asked. He laughed softly. You assume it as an emergency. You cancelled 2 meetings and a lunch with the mayor, according to Lily's gossip pipeline. He lifted a brow. Our company newsletter should just be Lily with a walkie-talkies. Grace chuckled, then grew serious. Tell me. Charles explained the board's concerns, the unapproved spending, Monday's inquisition. He kept his voice calm, but the tension in his fingers betrayed him, knuckles whitening around the mug. Grace listened, eyes on the rain-dappled water. When he finished, she spoke quietly. Do you regret helping us? He answered without thinking, not a second. Then defend it. He sighed. Easier said. Corporations speak in metrics, not melodies. Grace set her mug on the bench, unzipped the violin case, and pulled out the restored Amati copy. Rain drummed on the umbrella as she tuned with quick, practiced twists. May I show you something? He nodded. She raised the instrument, bow poised. In the gray hush she played a fragment of Bach's Partita No. 2, just 8 bars. The notes hung crystalline despite damp air. She lowered the bow. That piece was written by a man grieving his first wife. Music scholars say those measures are sorrow distilled, yet 3 centuries later, we play them in concert halls, and audiences pay hundreds to weep publicly. She met his gaze. Pain can become profit when framed differently. Charles blinked. You retelling me to reframe the argument. Show the board that compassion is an asset. Healthier employees, higher retention, brand loyalty. Put the melody in their metrics. A slow smile surfaced. You should have been a strategist. I was a janitor, she replied, lips curving. We solve messes for a living. A lull followed, filled only by rain whispers. Charles reached out, fingertips brushing the violin scroll. I worry about dragging you and Lily into board politics. Grace shook her head. You didn't drag us. We walked in, Lily, literally. He laughed, the sound vibrating like newly tuned strings. She certainly did. They finished coffee, the chill settling bones but warming spirits, when clouds began to part. Grace stood. I should return before Margaret dispatches a search party. He rose too. Thank you for Bach and bravery. She slipped the violin away, then surprised him by placing a hand over his heart. Elaine would be proud, she said simply. It was the first time she'd spoken Elaine's name aloud. The mention felt both knife and salve. His breath caught. How do you know? Because love this big leaves echoes. She tapped his chest. I can hear hers. His eyes stung, but he didn't look away. Rain light shimmered on Grace's cheeks. Whether drizzle or tears, he golden tell. Before a thought could veto, he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, a soft, reverent touch. She closed her eyes, accepting. When they parted, no words seemed adequate, so they shared silence. Richer than any speech, he hailed a cab for her, insisted on it, then stood on the curb until the taillights dissolved into traffic. Only then did he exhale, feeling the tectonic plates of his life realign. The weekend blurred in preparation for Monday's board session. Charles's executive team assembled feasibility studies, wellness data, per risk analyses. Margaret rehearsed him like a trial attorney, led with cost savings from reduced turnover. Cite Harvard study linking arts programs to productivity, close with projected shareholder value. Sunday night he sat alone in his high-rise condo, lights dim. Elena's picture remained on the mantel, smiling at a past version of him. He picked it up. "I thought my story ended with you," he whispered. "Turns out it was the intermission." Setting the frame down, he opened his laptop and began a new slide deck titled Second Quarter Impact People, Purpose, Profit. But numbers alone felt insufficient. On impulse, he imported a photo from Margaret's phone. Grace on the rooftop, violin poised, city skyline glowing behind her, another Lily in a lab coat from her school science fair, goggles askew, grinting, and a third janitorial staff standing under the new Wellness Initiative banner. Stainless steel bucket swap for celebratory punch bowls. He stared at the collage. For the first time, the company's mission felt visible. He slept 2 hours fitful but awoke clear-headed. Monday, boardroom, 12 directors in leather chairs, expressions a gradient from intrigued to annoyed. The mahogany table gleamed under recessed lighting, crystal water glasses aligned like sentinels. The chairwoman, Judith Crane, opened. "Mr. Bennett, we appreciate innovation, but several fiscal deviations require justification." Her tone managed to be both cordial and carnivorous. Charles clicked the remote. The first slide displayed profit-loss ratio safe territory. He narrated efficiency gains from improved staff morale, citing data from her analytics. Reactions were lukewarm. Slide 2, hospital bills mitigated by earlier interventions via expanded sick leave, resulting in lower insurance premiums. A few raised brows saw unscribbled notes. Then he advanced to slide 3, the photo collage. Murmurs rippled. Judith shared a pointed look with the head of audit. Charles stepped away from the podium, breaking formality. "These aren't line items. They read the faces behind the numbers." Grace Carter, night maintenance. 2 weeks ago, pneumonia nearly cost her life and us a dedicated employee. Because we intervened early, she is back, healthy and cross-training staff in safety protocols. He clicked Lily in goggles. "This is her granddaughter Lily. She wants to be an inventor. We host a STEM club for employees' families now. Retention among single parents has risen 12%. Next image, custodial team. When you treat the foundation with dignity, the skyscraper stands taller." Judith's foot tapped. Impatience or intrigue, hard to tell. "What about shareholder value?" Charles inhaled. "Compassion compounds interest." He flipped to metrics. Social media engagement up 40. Recruitment costs down. Productivity metrics climbing. Investors crave stability. A workforce that feels safe and valued is the most stable asset we can own. Still, resistance glinted in Samai's old guard versus new ethos. Time for the gambit. Charles tapped the remote. A short video played. It began with Grace's rooftop performance. The camera panned across listening employees, accountants, engineers, janitors, faces unified in wonder. The video ended with Lily whispering, "Family helps." Silence thickened. Even Judith's pen stilled. Charles let the hush breathe, then spoke softly. "We can be another corporation chasing quarterly decimals, or we can become a company whose legacy outlives ledgers. I choose the latter. If that choice costs my position, I accept." He slid a resignation letter down the table. "Not a bluff." Gasps fluttered. Judith studied him. Years of sparring had bred mutual respect. Today she saw an unyielding sincerity that defied spreadsheets. She turned to the legal counsel. "Liability assessment?" The attorney cleared his throat. "Wellness programs reduce litigation risk." "Actually," the head of her added, "recruiting has become easier. Top talent cites our culture in interviews." Judith tapped the resignation letter, then pushed it back toward Charles. "Bold moves merit bold support. Initiatives approved under pilot program. We'll review quarterly." She allowed a tight smile. "Don't tea make me regret it." Relief surged, but Charles maintained composure. "Thank you, I want tea." As directors filed out, Judith lingered. "Elaine would applaud, you know." His throat thickened. "You knew her well. She had a way of rearranging priorities." Judith's eyes softened. "Seems you found someone else gifted in that art." He nodded, emotion choking reply. She patted his arm and exited. Alone, he folded the resignation letter and slipped it into his wallet, a reminder of line in the sand days. Margaret burst into his office later, triumphant. "Unanimous pilot approval. Nicely played." She handed him a typed memo. "Press release draft. Marketing wants quotes." He skimmed, then paused. "Let us credit the initiative to the Carter Resilience Program named after Grace." Margaret's eyes shimmered. "She'll faint." He laughed. "I'll catch her." That evening, the rooftop courtyard hosted another impromptu gathering. Lilac blossoms had begun to open, perfuming the twilight. String lights flickered on as dusk settled. Maintenance staff served lemonade from industrial pitchers. Engineers lounged in beanbags once reserved for innovation labs. Grace arrived wearing a simple floral dress, violin in hand. Lily darted ahead, waving streamers crafted from recycled ribbon. Charles stood near the planters, heart-thudding with teenage awkwardness. When Grace spotted the brass plaque newly affixed to the garden wall, Carter Resilience Program rooted in care, reaching for tomorrow, her knees buckled. Charles stepped forward, steadying her. "I can see this is too much," she whispered. He shook his head. "It's overdue." Tears slipped, she let them. Lily read the plaque aloud, then hugged her grandma, squealing, "You re-famous for real." Laughter rippled among onlookers. Grace wiped her eyes, then lifted the violin. "One song for everyone who keeps cities shining after the lights go out." She launched into "You Are My Sunshine," inviting a sing-along. Charles's baritone wobbled off key, but Lily belted with gusto. Employees swayed, some recording, most simply savoring. Cameras would never bottle the electricity of that moment, a CEO harmonizing with janitors under violet clouds. Policy papers forgotten. After the final chord, Grace lowered her bow. Applause rose, but Charles stepped forward, raising a hand for quiet. "Tonight isn't just celebration," he announced. "It is a promise to lead with humanity." And personally, he turned to Grace, voice trembling. "It is a chance I thought life would never gift me again." Gasps, then hush. Grace's eyes widened. He took her hand. "Grace Carter, you taught me that second movements can be more beautiful than firsts. Would you allow me the honor of sharing whatever movements remain?" Breath caught across the rooftop. Lily clapped a hand over her mouth. Grace swayed, tears glistening. Then she nodded, small at first, then vigorous. Laughter and applause exploded. Charles didn't produce a ring, he'd buy one tomorrow. Or next week. Tonight he offered only his heart, which, after years in hibernation, beat steady and sure. Grace squeezed his hand. "Yes, Charles, the answer is yes." Lily whooped, "Best STEM club ever," drawing gales of laughter. The night deepened, stars pricked the velvet sky. Someone from facilities cued a playlist. Soft jazz floated. Couples danced, some lovers, some colleagues, all community. Charles and Grace swayed near the lilacs. He whispered, "Thank you for letting me start over." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for believing I never ended." Above them, rooftop lights illuminated blossoms opening at night, pale petals reflecting newfound hope. Wind carried their fragrance down city streets, where strangers might catch a note of sweetness and wonder where it came from. Weeks later, business journals headlined Bennett Industrial bets on compassion, stock rises anyway. Analysts scratched heads, shareholders smiled. But within Bennett Tower, the more significant rise was intangible laughter during breaks. Thank you notes taped to supply closets, a violinist's echo woven into workplace identity. Charles and Grace planned a small wedding for autumn lilac harvest season. Lily insisted on designing invitations featuring gears and violins because love is music that makes things work. And every morning, Charles walked the lobby before taking elevators skyward. He'd paused to greet night shift custodians clocking out, calling each by name. Some still stuttered, unused to eye contact from the top floor, but smiles grew genuine. In those exchanges, Charles found a richer metric than any quarterly report: the weight of respect, evenly distributed. One dawn, after shaking hands with a rookie janitor, Charles glanced at his reflection in the polished marble Grace once tended. He saw not a widower in expensive suits, but a man reclaimed by purpose. A man granted against odds and corporate skeptics a second chance. He touched the plaque over his heart pocket, the folded resignation letter. He left it there, a talisman. For he had discovered that walking away from an old story sometimes writes the best sequel. The marble gleamed back, bearing no trace of footprints, just as Grace taught: when you leave a place better than you found it, your own presence becomes invisible and everlasting like love. Charles straightened his tie, exhaled, and stepped into the elevator door, sliding closed around a future wide open. Director Thomas Greer liked to say that corporations didn't breathe, numbers did. Sitting at the gleaming mahogany table inside Bennett Industrial Holdings' 13th floor boardroom, he savored the sterile certainty of spreadsheets far more than the messy pulse of people. Yet lately, the pulse had crept in like humidity, fogging the onerous air with rumor. It began as casual chatter in the executive gym. Nothing more than a personal trainer whispered the CEO had been skipping his 5 a.m. workouts. From there, the gossip fattened. Staffers noticed Charles Bennett taking unscheduled elevator rides to maintenance levels, disappearing for long coffee breaks, walking a child through the lobby hand in hand as if auditioning for a granddad role he'd never sought before. By the time the story reached the ears of certain shareholders, it had mutated into a full-blown narrative. Bennett was funneling company resources into a janitor's personal life. Exactly how and exactly why remained tantalizingly vague. Vagueness, Greer knew, was rumor's favorite fertilizer. On a drizzly Friday morning, he called an emergency finance subcommittee meeting. The boardroom led panels reflected nervous faces: CFO Maya Ishikawa, legal counsel Victor Dunn, audit chair Evelyn Brooks, and marketing director Jonah Pierce. Coffee-steamed rain pattered the window. Silence thickened until Greer opened a thin, silver laptop. Item 1, he announced. We've uncovered several discretionary expenditures flagged by Treasury. They traced back to Charles S. personal approval. A click, and the wall-mounted screen populated with line items. Wellness Initiative Phase 1, Medical Leave Supplementation for Non-Executive Staff, Rooftop Horticultural Project. Instrument Restoration under Facilities Budget. None of these appear in last quarter's strategic plan. Maya lifted a brow. We approved modest wellness funding. Modest, Greer echoed. But the number on that slide is a 300 per overrun. Jonah leaned forward. Isn't the ROI still pending? The employee engagement surge. Engagement doesn't pay dividends, Greer cut in, nor does sentimental landscaping. Evelyn cleared her throat, calm but firm. You skipped the biggest anomaly. Thomas, she tapped her stylus against the screen, highlighting a single-entry private medical transport Carter. Grace, who is Grace Carter? Greer smiled thinly. Night shift custodial staff, also, according to building security logs. Recipient of multiple eco-authorized perks, guest suite lodging for a minor dependent. Gourmet meal deliveries and a top-tier medical referral worth 10 grand. Victor Dunne's eyes narrowed behind frameless glasses. Is this nepotism? Personal relocation? Workplace relationship? That, Greer said, savoring the word, is what we must determine. Across the tower, Charles Bennett strode into his office unaware of codes and conjecture. He carried 2 cups, 1 black coffee, 1 vanilla steamed milk, extra honey intended for a quick elevator ride to the third floor guest services office where Grace Carter was finishing light-duty paperwork. Rain beaded on his overcoat. Optimism glimmered in his eyes. The grandchild of optimism, however, was distraction, and distraction is a luxury no CEO can afford for long. His chief of staff, Margaret, intercepted him at the door. Thomas Greer is sniffing around Treasury. Charles exhaled. Let him sniff. The budget is solvent. He is gathering signatures for a closed-door hearing Monday morning. Her voice lowered. Rumors are swirling about your relationship with Ms. Carter. Charles shut his eyes a beat. We expected scrutiny. Scrutiny, yes. A corporate witch hunt, maybe not. Do we tell Grace? Not yet, he decided. I'll handle Greer. Greer began planting seeds, first with the media, an anonymous email to a business gossip blog hinting that Bennett Tower was doubling as a private sanctuary for a blue-collar mistress. Then with investors' hushed phone calls to 2 activist hedge fund managers known for ousting ecos over governance issues. Finally, with disgruntled mid-level execs' hallway conversations that started, I am sure it is nothing, but... By Sunday night, the tower vibrated with whispers, like a microphone wedged too close to an amplifier. Grace felt the tremor, though she couldn't name its source. In the laundry room of her apartment complex, she overheard 2 maintenance co-workers debating whether the CEO had gone off the rails. At the grocery store, a cashier commented on a tabloid headline, Billionaire, a secret janitor sweetheart. Lily, mercifully, remained oblivious, busy perfecting a lemon battery science experiment. Grace's phone buzzed. Charles. It was nearly 9 p.m. Hi, she answered, trying for cheer. Can we meet? Boardroom 7 tomorrow. I may need you to answer questions. Her pulse skittered. Am I in trouble? Not remotely. They all try to rattle you. Don't let them. She swallowed. I'll be there. Monday, dawn breaking, slack-jawed over Lake Michigan. Grace arrived early, hair pinned neat, wearing her cleanest uniform pressed flat and paired with the lilac scarf Lily insisted was lucky. Charles greeted her outside the elevator. 10 minutes, he said quietly. Stay calm, speak truth. Inside the boardroom, 12 directors formed a semicircle. Greer sat center, flanked by Judith Crane, the chairwoman, who studied Grace as one might study a rare instrument, curiosity tempered by caution. Greer began. Ms. Carter, thank you for attending. We are conducting a routine governance review regarding recent expenditures. He toggled a slide. Grace's hospital invoice, the rooftop garden budget, the violin restoration receipt, money as incrimination. Charles stood. If this is about my discretionary approvals, direct questions to me. Greer smiled frostily. We'll get to that. First, foundation facts. He looked at Grace. How long have you been employed here? 6 years, sir. Job title? Night shift custodial technician. Educational background? She hesitated. Harbor Conservatory of Music, Bachelor of Fine Arts. Murmurs fluttered. Greer feigned surprise. Fascinating. Yet you remopping floors. Grace met his gaze. Work that pays the rent is good work. Judith's eyes softened, but Greer pressed on. How would you characterize your relationship with Mr. Bennett? Grace's heartbeat thundered. Charles opened his mouth, but she spoke first. Professional, respectful, recently, yes, friendship. Friendship that merits $10,000 in medical fees? Charles strode forward. She required immediate care. The company covers all employees' emergency transport under new wellness rules. Greer clicked to the next slide, a photo grainy zoom of Charles escorting Lily through the lobby. Mr. Bennett, why is a child residing in corporate guest quarters? Because her legal guardian was hospitalized. Charles answered evenly. The accommodation prevented child services involvement. And the violin? A sentimental gift? Charles's temper flared. A company-funded instrument restoration program for employee families, part of our arts initiative. Greer leaned back. Our shareholders might question whether janitorial morale justifies luxury perks. Grace closed her eyes. Images of late-night scrubbing, Lilia's small hands holding soup spoons. The rooftop melody worth more than any perk flooded her. She opened her eyes. May I speak? Judith nodded. Proceed. Grace rose, palms damp. Ivy scrubbed vomit off boardroom carpets after holiday parties. Ivy wiped scuff marks made by $1,000 shoes. I am invisible until something shines. Mr. Bennett saw me before the shine, she swallowed. He didn't pay my bills. He invested in human capital, mine, yes, but also every cleaner, guard, and intern who will get sick someday. If that is a poor use of company funds, then perhaps our balance sheet is skewed. The room stilled. Even Greer looked momentarily unmoored. Judith interlaced her fingers. Thank you, Ms. Carter. She gestured to the exit. We'll deliberate privately. Charles accompanied Grace outside. The door shut with a pneumatic sigh. She exhaled shaky breath. How did I do? Perfectly, he whispered. He wanted to hug her but settled for squeezing her hand. They waited in a side corridor, marble cold underfoot. Minutes dragged. Grace's phone buzzed Lilia's school number. She stepped away to answer. Moments later she returned pale. Lilia's father showed up. He is demanding custody paperwork. Charles's jaw clenched. Daniel Carter? Grace nodded. He heard rumors, thinks there is money. Greer appeared in the hallway. Mr. Bennett, the board requests your return. His eyes flicked to Grace, alone. Charles squeezed her hand again. I'll handle this. Inside, directors whispered among themselves. Judith spoke first. We find no breach of fiduciary duty yet. However, perception risk remains. We require a formal policy framework and cost cap within 30 days. Additionally, any personal relationship between you and Ms. Carter must be disclosed. Charles's shoulders straightened. We be friends. Beyond that, uncertain. If that evolves, I will disclose. Greer folded his arms. Until then, refrain from further discretionary spending. One misstep and we'll revisit removal proceedings. Charles inclined his head. Understood. Judith slid a document across. Sign acknowledging conditions. He signed, steady hand. As he left, Greer whispered just loud enough, careful, Bennett. Empires topple over heartstrings. Charles paused at the door. Empires rotten with indifference topple faster. Then he walked out. He found Grace near the elevator, knuckles white. I need to get to Lily, she said. I'll drive. They rode down in silence, hearts pounding different worries. In the garage, raindrops drummed on metal roof. Charles gripped the wheel. We'll protect her. Grace, both of you. She closed her eyes. Greer was right about one thing, heartstrings can snap. Charles reached over, covering her hand with his. Then we'll braid them into steel cables. Outside, the city blurred with rain and rumor, but inside the car, resolve hardened. Whispers in the boardroom had raised the stakes. Now the real test would unfold beyond polished tables and courtrooms. In headlines, in the fragile territory between second chances and the forces intent on shredding them. As traffic lights blinked crimson onto wet pavement, Grace whispered, we'll need proof, witnesses, money. Start listing, Charles said, voice low but fierce, because we were about to turn whispers into thunder. Thunderheads clustered over the Cook County Circuit Courthouse, flinging bruised shadows across its limestone columns. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed, file carts squeaked, and anxious voices overlapped like poorly tuned instruments. Courtroom 7 Family Division was already a tinderbox of emotions before Judge Beverly Klein even took the bench. Today, the docket's most volatile case was Carter v. Carter, a sudden petition for full custody filed by Daniel Carter against Grace Carter, the grandmother, and, by proxy, the ever-present specter of corporate titan Charles Bennett. 1 week, that's all Daniel had needed to weaponize rumor. After news sites hinted at Bennett as janitor sweetheart, Daniel smelled cash the way a vulture smells carrion. He reemerged after 7 silent years, learned just enough legal jargon from Google, and marched into a lawyer's office waving screenshots of tabloid headlines. The attorney, sensing a quick payday, agreed to file an emergency motion. The child, Lily Rose Carter, was allegedly being exposed to an environment of questionable moral and financial influence. Grace spent the week dredging courage she didn't know remained. Charles spent it converting boardroom aggression into courtroom strategy, and Lily Sweet. Oblivious Lily spent it decorating her science fair poster with glitter glued into the shape of alternating current circuits. Monday, 8:03 a.m. Grace stood outside 7 hugging a slim folder Lilia's school records. Pediatric history, landlord reference proof that love sometimes wore paperwork armor. Diana Morales, the attorney Charles had quietly retained a powerhouse known as the Shield in family law circles paced beside her. Stilettos clicking, Charles arrived from the security checkpoint carrying 3 coffees, 1 black for himself, 1 decaf for Grace, 1 double espresso for Diana. Ready? He asked. Grace managed a nod. Her lilac scarf, now a talisman, hid shallow breaths. I keep thinking, what if the judge sees my janitor uniform and assumes I can tea provide? Diana accepted the espresso, eyes steely. Family court isn't a couture runway. Ms. Carter, it is a credibility contest. Your credibility is rock solid. She sipped. Uniforms are symbols of work ethic, not weakness. Charles lowered his voice. Daniel can fake 7 years of absence. Trust that. The double doors opened. A bailiff called the case number. They filed inside. Courtroom 7 was utilitarian, no mahogany grandeur, just beige walls, plastic benches, and a judge's bench cluttered with manila files. Daniel sat at the petitioner's table in an ill-fitting blazer, hair slicked back with more confidence than care. Beside him lounged Trent Mason, Esquire, a lawyer whose billboard on I-94 promised relentless results. Mason scrawled his phone, smirking. Across the aisle, Diana unloaded color-coded binders. Charles took a seat in the first row, supportive but intentionally off counsel table to avoid optics of billion-dollar intimidation. He caught Daniel's eye, the younger man, as bravado faltered. At 8:15, Judge Klein entered, 60-ish, wire-rimmed glasses, reputation for slicing through theatrics. Good morning. Let us keep this efficient and civil, Mr. Mason. Uriah. Opening salvos. Mason rose, buttoning his suit like a weapon holster. Your Honor. My client, Mr. Carter, seeks immediate custody of his daughter, Lily Rose, on grounds that her current guardian is medically compromised and financially unstable. Moreover, he clicked a remote. A tabloid screenshot illuminated the evidence monitor headline: Billionaire CEO hides janitor, lover, and child. The minor has been exposed to a sensational situation unfit for healthy development. Grace's cheeks burned. Charles clenched fists. Mason continued, voice irby. We question why a child was housed in corporate suites instead of her own home. Why medical costs were covered by Ms. Carter's employer, potentially indebting the child emotionally to strangers. We propose placing Lily with her biological father, who is ready to provide a safe, stable environment. Klein peered over glasses. Counsel, your client's last documented contact with the child. Mason faltered, admittedly sparse, Your Honor, but that absence was due to financial hardship and misinformation. We'll examine that, Ms. Morales. Diana stood, calm as a surgeon. Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Daniel Carter forfeited parental rights through years of willful abandonment, contributing neither time nor support. We will show Ms. Grace Carter has been Lilia's sole caregiver, providing consistent housing, education, and medical care. She paused. We also intend to prove Mr. Carter's sudden interest coincides with sensational media coverage, indicating financial motive rather than paternal concern. Witness 1, Grace Carter. Diana guided Grace to the stand. After oath, questions flowed like carefully braided rope. How long have you been Lilia's primary caregiver? Since her birth, 8 years. Has Mr. Carter provided financial support? No, ma'am. Any birthday calls, holiday visits? Grace shook her head. None. Diana produced bank statements, pediatric logs, school attendance awards, all under your care? Grace confirmed. Mason cross-examined, aiming to rattle. Ms. Carter, isn't it true you were recently hospitalized for pneumonia? Yes. And during that time, the child was left unsupervised? Incorrect, Grace said firmly. She was temporarily under company care with security and medical staff. Mason smirked. Company care courtesy of your friendship with the CEO? Objection. Diana rose. Relevance and insinuation. Klein narrowed her gaze. Sustained. Counsel, stay on parenting fitness. Grace stepped down, heart throbbing but intact. Witness 2 Daniel Carter. Mason prepped his client with a shoulder squeeze. Daniel swaggered to the stand, raised his right hand, recited the oath. Mason started. Mr. Carter, why were you absent? Daniel sighed theatrically. I was young, unemployed. Grace told me Madeline, God rest her soul, didn't he want me around. I thought Lily was better off. Diana's turn. She approached, voice velvet soft. Mr. Carter, do you have evidence of attempts to contact your daughter? Emails, letters, child support payments? Daniel S. Adam S. Applebob. I moved a lot. Phones got cut off. Where do you currently live? Airbnb until I find a place. Employment? I am between opportunities. Yet you secured legal counsel. I borrowed. She pivoted. Your Honor, we request to enter into evidence Exhibit 14 social media posts from Mr. Carter celebrating a $15,000 sports betting win 2 months ago. The monitor showed Daniel holding cash stacks. Guest slitted. Diana's voice cooled. You had funds but no child support? Daniel stammered. Gambling income in T steady. No further questions. Recess. Judge Klein called a 10-minute break. In the hallway, Daniel barked at Mason. Why didn't you object? Because she had receipts, Mason snapped. Next time, Dante, post your sins on Instagram. Gray sank onto a bench, trembling. Charles knelt. Water, she nodded. He fetched a cup and whispered, you were amazing. She managed a wan smile. Across the corridor, journalists hovered. Charles shielded Grace with his coat, ushering her back in as the bailiff called court to order. Expert witness child psychologist. Diana introduced Dr. Elena Flores, who'd spent 2 assessing sessions with Lily. Dr. Flores testified that Lily exhibited secure attachment to her grandmother, expressed anxiety about her father's sudden re-entry, and thrived academically and socially. Mason attempted to undermine. Doctor, could the child adjust to living with her biological parent? Children can adapt, Dr. Flores allowed, but abrupt transitions after prolonged abandonment increase risk of trauma. Bombshell evidence. Mason Wathenty finished. He called a surprise witness, Tabitha Green, former Bennett Tower receptionist. Tabitha walked in, stilettos echoing accusations. Under Mason's guidance, she testified, I saw Ms. Carter and Mr. Bennett embracing on multiple occasions, looked romantic. Diana cross-examined swiftly. Ms. Green, did you witness inappropriate behavior in front of the child? No. Did Mr. Bennett or Ms. Carter ever ask you to conceal anything illegal? No. You were terminated for repeated tardiness last month? Mason objected. Klein overruled. Goes to credibility. Tabitha's face flushed. That was unrelated. Thank you. No further questions. The CEO takes the stand. Rumor had cast Charles as shadow puppeteer. Transparency demanded he step into the light. Diana called him. Mason's eyes glittered. This was the showdown. Charles swore in, adjusted microphone. Diana's questions were surgical. She established his income, philanthropic record, and zero criminal history. Mr. Bennett, have you offered Ms. Carter compensation for personal relationship? Never. Why did you provide medical assistance? Duty of care to an employee. Do you intend to adopt Lily? Charles's voice warned. Only if she and her grandmother desired and the court found it in her best interest. Mason strode up. Mr. Bennett, were you in love with Ms. Carter? Diana, objection relevance. Klein counsel, tie this to the child's welfare quickly. Mason, establishing motive, Your Honor. Klein gestured him on. Charles met Daniel's glare, then addressed the room. Yes, my feelings are genuine. Whisper rippled. Mason pounced. So you admit your financial power influences this case? I admit using my resources to ensure Lily's safety. Love motivates, but it does not monetize. Mason scoffed. Isn't it true you could send Lily to any boarding school on earth? Trips, gifts by her affection? Charles Escay steeled. Safety isn't tea for sale, it as a right. Mr. Carter forfeited that right. I merely filled the vacuum. Mason attempted another barb, but the judge cut him off. We've strayed. Move on. Closing arguments. Mason leaned on paternal rights. My client made mistakes but seeks redemption. The law favors biological parents unless they reprove an unfit. He gestured toward Grace. Her health is fragile, her income meager. Sentiment cannot override security. Diana rose last. Security isn't measured in bank digits but in consistency and love. Mr. Carter had 8 years to redeem himself. He showed up only when headlines hinted at a jackpot. Ms. Carter, despite limited means, cultivated a thriving child. The statue prioritizes best interest, not DNA nostalgia. She closed her binder. Lilia's best interest lives with grace. Verdict. Judge Klein requested 30 minutes for review. Tension coiled like a stopwatch spring. Grace prayed, fingers interlaced with Charles S. Daniel paced. Reporters typed angles. Bailiff called order. Klein returned, glasses perched. Findings of fact, Mr. Daniel Carter demonstrated willful abandonment under Illinois Statute 750 ILS 51. Ms. Grace Carter has served as de facto guardian, providing stable environment. Relief petition for full custody is denied. Ms. Carter retains sole guardianship. Mr. Carter may petition for supervised visitation after completing 6 months of consistent child support payments and parenting classes. The gavel struck. Grace's knees buckled. Charles caught her. Across the aisle, Daniel exploded. "This is rigged." The bailiff restrained him. Mason whispered, "Appeal later." But Daniel shrugged him off. Judge Klein addressed Grace directly. "Ms. Carter, please continue fostering the child's flourishing spirit." Court adjourned. She exited. Post-court hallway. Reporters swarmed. Charles shielded Grace. Diana spoke briefly. Justice favored the child's stability. Microphones flashed. Lenses clicked. Daniel, flanked by Mason, shouted, "They bought the judge." Security ushered him away. A journalist yelled, "Mr. Bennett, any comment on your relationship?" Charles answered without pause, "We protect family. That's all." Grace reached for his hand. "Family," she echoed. Outside, rain had halted. Sunlight speared clouds, gilding courthouse steps. Lily waited on the plaza with Nurse Tiffany, who had offered babysitting duty. When she saw Grace, she sprinted. "Grandma, did we win?" Grace knelt, tears gleaming. "We won, sweetheart. We won." Lilia's arms wrapped tight. Charles joined, and Lily looped an arm around his leg. Group hug. Reporters caught the tableau tomorrow as headlines would pivot from scandal to triumph. Epilogue of the day. Back at Bennett Tower's rooftop, employees gathered for impromptu celebration. A sheet cake read, "Welcome home, Justice." The lilacs were in full bloom. Scent slicing the city grit. Grace, now free of legal threat, raised her violin and played Amazing Grace. Voices joined. Even Margaret hummed. Charles watched Lily dance, felt Grace's shoulder brush his, and knew the boardroom whispers had been drowned by a louder truth. Courts and companies alike could still be swayed by steadfast hearts. Night fell. String lights toggled on, constellations mirrored by skyscraper windows. Charles leaned into Grace. "You stood taller than the tower today." She laid her hand over his. "We did together." Somewhere below, janitors polished floors, investors refreshed stock apps, and Daniel nursed bitterness. Yet on this roof, victory tasted like lilac-scented air and 3 intertwined heartbeats. A court had affirmed what love already knew: family isn't awarded by blood. It is upheld by constancy. And so, beneath a sky grinced clean of storm, Lily twirled. Grace played, and Charles believed fully, irrevocably, that second chances weren't given by fate. They were claimed, defended, and celebrated until the gavel of life itself echoed in applause. Chicago's summer unfurled like a giant silk banner, bright, hot, and impossible to ignore. The city buzzed with open window music, food truck aromas, and commuters daring to trade jackets for optimism. Inside Bennett Tower, the same energy hummed, as if the glass and steel had decided to adopt a human heartbeat. It was the first Monday after the custody victory, and everyone seemed taller, not in stature, but in spirit. Grace Carter felt that extra inch of height as she stepped out of the elevator onto the 49th floor, no longer wearing a janitor's uniform but a navy blue blazer over soft gray slacks. The badge clipped to her lapel read Grace Carter, Director of Community Employee Engagement. Charles insisted on the title. She bargained for something humbler, but he countered that humility belonged in deeds, not business cards. In her new tote bag sat 2 treasures: a freshly tuned violin bow and Lilia's weekend drawing, a crayon sketch of a skyscraper whose windows spelled family in giant block letters. Grace pulled both items out and propped them on her new desk. Still too glossy for her liking. One scuff at a time, she thought. Margaret appeared in the doorway. "The CEO would like to see you in the Innovation Hub. Pronto. And do not shoot the messenger." His words, not mine. Grace laughed, nerves fluttering in her stomach like startled pigeons. Led the way. The Innovation Hub had once been a sterile space filled with 3D printers and ping-pong tables. Designed for millennials brainstorming the next profit center, today it vibrated with a different ambition. Whiteboards displayed sketches of community centers, scholarship funnels, and mental health pods built into break rooms. On the largest wall, someone had written in marker, "Dream big enough to fit everyone." Charles stood beside a scale model of Bennett Tower, an architectural miniature complete with the rooftop lilac garden rendered out of purple Lego pieces. Lily and two junior engineers crouched next to him, debating whether Lego people needed safety railings. When Grace entered, Lily sprang up. "Grandma, we've upgraded the elevator system so it stops at a secret library floor." Grace raised an eyebrow at Charles. "Secret library?" He grinned. "We'll call it secure document storage in the budget notes." The junior engineers excused themselves, leaving the trio alone. Charles gestured to an empty stool. "Have a seat. We're redrafting a blueprint for the Carter Resilience Center." Grace sank onto the stool. "A what?" "A multipurpose wellness and education center on the tower's mezzanine level," he explained, tapping the model. "The old mail sorting warehouse is half vacant. We converted into classrooms, childcare space, meditation rooms, even a small auditorium for music recitals." Lily clasped her hands, eyes sparkling. "And a moneymaker's lab for kids, with soldering iron safe ones." Grace stared at the model, overwhelmed. "Charles, this is massive and expensive." "Not as expensive as turnover," he replied. "Besides, the board warmed up after the win in court. Stock hit an all-time high last week. We have momentum, Grace. Let us use it." She traced a finger along the miniature lilac garden. "What do you need from me?" "Vision," he said, "and honesty when I drift into billionaire excess." Lily tugged Grace's sleeve. "And your music? You promised to teach me Vivaldi so we can do a Grand Mickey duet at opening day." Grace felt her throat tighten. She hadn't imagined life could tilt so quickly from survival to possibility. "All right," she said softly. "Let us build dreams together." Phase 1 Listening Tours. Grace insisted that before concrete was poured or budgets approved, they listen. So she and Lily led Charles on what Lily dubbed the hallway roadshow, stopping on every floor to ask employees one question: if Bennett Tower had one new space just for you, what would it hold? Answers varied, some practical, some whimsical: a nap lounge, free music lessons, a rooftop beekeeping club. One shy mailroom clerk suggested a lending closet for dress clothes employees could borrow for life events. Grace wrote each idea on index cards, pinning them to a corkboard map of the mezzanine. Phase 2 Stakeholder Gauntlet. The following week, Grace and Charles presented the concept to department heads. Greer attended via video, arms crossed. "Capital expenditures must correlate with productivity," he warned. Grace took the mic. "Productivity doesn't spawn in spreadsheets, it germinates in people who feel seen. The Resilience Center will reduce sick days, boost retention, and attract top talent." She clicked to a slide showing charts of companies with similar programs. "But here is the real key," she added, shifting to a photo of Lily soldering wires beside a security guard learning Excel. Cross-pollination of skills. A murmur of approval rolled through the room. Even Greer's stern veneer cracked. "Proceed with pilot," he conceded. Phase 3 Construction Chaos. Summer heat thickened as contractors demolished drywall. Lily earned a hard chat sticker chart. Logging every day, she delivered lemonade to the crew. Charles spent evenings reviewing acoustics for the rehearsal hall, sneaking glances at Grace reading blueprints under work lights, curls of silver hair escaping her bun. One night, after the workers left and only cement dust lingered, Charles found her alone staring at a blank wall. "Frame trouble?" he asked. "Stage fright trouble," she admitted. "I am turning 56 next month. Building a center feels like trying to outrun time." He stepped closer, fingertips brushing her shoulder. "We're not outrunning it. We're refilling it." Grace smiled, tension easing. "Then let us fill it with music." Parallel tracks. Technology meets humanity. While mezzanine chaos grew, Grace's second initiative quietly took shape: the night shift portal. She remembered years of scribbling maintenance issues on sticky notes that vanished by dawn. Now, partnering with it and drawing on Lilia's fascination with circuits, she designed a tablet-based app where custodians could log problems, request supplies, or suggest improvements. Launch night was a 2 a.m. pizza party in the basement supply hub. Custodians gathered around Grace and Lily as they demoed the portal. When the submit button glowed green, cheers echoed down concrete corridors. Grace's heart swelled. For the first time, the night shift felt plugged into daylight decisions. She sent Charles a selfie of the group holding tablets and pizza slices. Caption: "The real graveyard shift now digital." He replied with a string of fireworks emojis. Roadblock permit panic. 2 months in, city inspectors cited outdated sprinkler systems in the mezzanine. Renovation stalled, costs spiked. Greer emailed urgent budget bleed. Charles punched elevator buttons hard enough to set off maintenance alerts. Grace met him on the mezzanine stairwell, where caution tape fluttered like defeat streamers. He paced, frustration radiating. "We'll blow the contingency fund." Grace listened, then said, "What if we phase the build? Open the maker's lab and loan closet first, low construction footprint. Keep momentum while sprinklers get fixed." Charles paused, gears turning. "Keep promise visibility high, risk low." "That is brilliant." He kissed her forehead, leaving a smudge of drywall dust. They split the project into modular rollouts. The board applauded the nimble pivot, and the city fast-tracked sprinkler plans when Charles hosted inspectors at a rooftop luncheon catered by the in-house culinary apprentices, a program he fast-tracked after overhearing a secretary lament lunchtime costs. Community echoes. News of the Resilience Center rippled into West Side neighborhoods where Bennett Tower employees lived. Local principals requested partnerships. Grace proposed Saturday STEM and strings workshops, where Lily would teach circuits and she'd teach beginner violin, supported by volunteer engineers and musicians. Charles secured grants to supply buses and boxed lunches. The first Saturday, 80 kids poured into the half-finished center, hard chats replaced by safety goggles. They tinkered with lead bracelets, hammered rhythm on plastic buckets, and wove through maze-like halls that smelled of fresh lumber and possibility. One shy girl, Marisol, asked Grace if violins could speak Spanish. Grace placed the bow in her hand. "Violins speak emotion, language free." Marisol drew a squeaky note, then another, until a simple tune emerged. Tears lined her dark lashes as sound filled the unfinished room. Grace glanced at Charles, who stood in the doorway with 2 city council members. He mouthed, "Thank you." An unplanned dress rehearsal. Late July, an email chain about the annual shareholders gala threatened to upend progress. The event typically featured string quartets imported from New York and a 6-figure decor budget. Charles saw an opportunity. "Let us showcase our in-house talent instead," he told the planning committee. Resilience Center debut concert. Grace hesitated. "The hall isn't finished." "We'll hold it under construction lights," he replied. "Authenticity is the new crystal chandelier." Board members balked at first, but Judith Crane surprised everyone. "We've been preaching transparency. Time to eat our sermon." She greenlit the plan. The week before the gala, electricians raced to secure wires, painters slapped primer, and Lily supervised glows-in-the-dark arrow decals so guests wouldn't trip. Grace rehearsed a motley crew: 3 custodians on guitar, 2 accountants on cello, Lily on ukulele, and Charles, after weeks of clandestine lessons on piano, playing simple arpeggios. Opening night. Shareholders arrived in tuxedos and cocktail dresses, expecting chandeliers, greeted instead by neon safety signs and the smell of sawdust. Doubt flickered in manicured eyes. Then lights dimmed, and Grace stepped forward in a midnight blue dress the payroll supervisor had sewn from leftover stage curtains. She raised her bow, and the ensemble launched into a medley: "Here Comes the Sun" seguing into "Ode to Joy," ending on a bluesy riff improvised by the guitar custodians. The hall as cement columns turned the music raw, vibrant. Guests tapped shoes, loosened collars. When the last chord rang, applause thundered, echoing off bare studs like cannon fire. Judith took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed Return on Inclusion." She pointed to a banner: "Carter Resilience Center, grand opening October 1st. Investors snapped photos, hashtags sprouting faster than drywall compound could dry. Greer approached Grace afterward, extended his hand. "Impressive turnaround time," he conceded. She shook it, noticing how sincerity softened even the most ridged fingers. Personal blueprints. Summer's end approached, and with it, Grace's birthday. Lily and Charles hatched a covert plan, turning the rooftop garden into a twilight banquet with fairy lights woven through lilac branches. The staff potluck dishes representing 50 different cultures, proof that diversity tasted delicious. Just after sunset, Charles tapped a glass. "Tonight, we celebrate the woman who taught us concrete can bloom." He produced a small velvet box, another surprise. Grace's breath caught. Not a ring this time, but a silver key engraved with intertwined violin and gear motifs. "Key to the Resilience Center," he explained, "because it began with your story." Grace slid the key onto a chain around her neck, speechless. Lily shouted, "Speech, speech," prompting cheers. Grace steadied herself. "I used to think dreams expired at a certain age," she began, voice tremulous. "But you've shown me they just wait for fresh blueprints." She lifted her glass of sparkling cider. "To building dreams together, one note, one nail, one kindness at a time." The clink of glasses echoed under the city night. Fireworks burst from a nearby ball game, accidental confetti streaking the sky. In that moment, Grace felt the tower itself exhale, a structure once defined by profit margins now beating in sync with human possibility. Final push. September blurred into a race against ribbon cutting. Grace pulled 14 tour days. But this time the exhaustion felt purposeful, not punishing. She moved through corridors with a clipboard, checking off punch list tasks, install acoustic panels, program smart lighting scenes, stock the uniform lending closet with donated blazers. Custodians greeted her as boss lady, which made her laugh every time. One evening, after ensuring signage for wheelchair access was properly mounted, she found Charles alone in the auditorium, playing quiet scales on a grand piano recently delivered. His suit jacket lay on a folding chair, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. "What is that?" she asked, stepping onto the stage. "Just keeping fingers from rusting," he said. "Sit." She complied, leaning against the piano. He shifted into a piece she recognized, Claire de Lune. He'd been practicing in secret. As notes drifted, the room felt complete. She closed her eyes, humming a harmony. When the last chord faded, she whispered, "Do you ever fear it will all disappear? The board, the investors, one wrong earnings call." And he took her hand. "Buildings can topple. This," he lifted their joined hands, "only grows." Grand opening. October 1st dawned crisp, skies a watercolor wash of pink and tangerine. The mezzanine had transformed, glass walls revealed a maker's lab stocked with 3D printers, a wellness studio draped in calming greens, and a recital hall whose honeycomb stage gleamed under theatrical lights. Ribbons of lilac fabric hung from rails, echoing the rooftop blossoms now out of season but firmly rooted. City officials, media, employees, and neighborhood families poured in. Judith cut the ribbon with oversized scissors, but not before calling Lily to join her, the youngest project manager. She joked. Cameras flashed as Lily waved. In the auditorium, the inaugural concert kicked off. This time Lily and Grace performed Vivaldi's Spring. Lily on ukulele adaptation, Grace on violin. Mid-pace, the doors at the back opened quietly. Night shift custodians slipped in wearing clean uniforms, holding tablets that still smelled of cardboard unboxing. They took seats, mouths open in wonder, as if finally invited into daylight. Charles watched from the wings, pride a physical heat in his chest. He remembered the morning Lily had walked into his suite wearing a jumpsuit 5 sizes too big, and felt astonished by the dominoes a single act of courage could tip. After the performance, he took the stage. "Today isn't a finale," he said, voice a little shaky through the sound system. "It's a foundation. Let us raise every ceiling until the sky looks low." He gestured to the crowd. "Now go explore open drawers, test tools, challenge the status quo." Exploration ensued. Accountants tried soldering irons, interns meditated beside executives, a security guard launched a drone camera over the mezzanine capturing bird's-eye shots of kids painting murals. Those images later adorned the company's annual report under a new section titled Purpose. Nightfall epilogue. After guests drifted out and Janitor's old colleagues, new peers began a gentle sweep. Grace and Charles stood on the mezzanine balcony overlooking the empty auditorium. Lily lay on a beanbag below, snoring softly with a violin case as a pillow. Grace leaned into Charles, exhaustion sweet in her bones. "We did it." He wrapped an arm around her. "Phase 1, he corrected. Next year. Satellite centers in our regional offices." She laughed, ambitious. "Blame the project manager," he teased, nodding toward sleeping Lily. They fell into comfortable silence, watching stage lights dim automatically. Somewhere, a custodial cart rolled its wheels, squeaking a lullaby. Grace whispered, "Thank you for giving my music a home." Charles kissed her hair. "You gave my home some music." She closed her eyes, listening to the building breathe. Elevator shafts groaned. Vivint sighed, a mechanical symphony underscored by faraway city sirens. Once those sounds had meant another long night of unseen toil. Now they were the bass line to dreams being constructed, note by note, nail by nail. Months later, business journals would cite the Carter Resilience Center as a game-changing model for corporate America, proof that empathy scaled. But numbers would never capture the moment Lily woke from her beanbag nap, looked up at the balcony, and whispered, "Grandma, Mr. Charles, can we stay here forever?" Grace smiled down. "We already do, honey. Every time somebody learns something new, or finds a quiet place to breathe, or hears music for the first time, we rehear." Charles added, "And forever has never felt so possible." So they descended the stairs, scooped Lily into their arms, and walked out under mezzanine arches still scented with wet paint and lilac potpourri. The tower stood anchored in steel, but its truest architecture now consisted of unquantifiable things, second chances. shared songs, and a childless bright certainty that buildings like people could learn to stretch, bend and blossom. Outside, winter's breath hinted at the horizon, but inside Bennett Tower, summer's spirit lingered, held fast by three dream builders determined to fill time, not outrun it. And in that steadfast filling, the future found its blueprint. April in Chicago arrived like a long-promised apology. After months of gray skies and salt-stained sidewalks, the city suddenly burst into blush. Tulips blazed along Michigan Avenue. Park fountains shimmered again, and lake winds traded their icy bite for something almost flirtatious. It was, everyone agreed, the perfect season for beginnings that had waited a lifetime. On the rooftop of Bennett Tower, the same 60-story perch where lilacs first took root, a cluster of workers draped white and lavender bunting over the wrought iron trellis. Strings of Edison bulbs zigzagged overhead, their filaments still cold against the dawn air. Below, streetlights clicked off one by one, as if giving the morning permission to proceed. In less than 10 hours, this sky garden would host a wedding decades into making, the union of Charles Bennett, 67, corporate colossus turned community evangelist, and Grace Carter, 56, night shift janitor turned director of dreams. The guest list was as unconventional as their love story: custodians and suites, violinists and venture capitalists, neighborhood kids from Saturday workshops, and a handful of gray-haired women who had once braided Grace's hair in dorm bathrooms during conservatory days. Invitations, illustrated by Lily in pastel crayon, featured a skyscraper entwined with blooming vines. At the bottom, she printed dress code: come as you really are. Morning rituals. Grace woke in the apartment she and Lily now shared on the tower's 23rd floor, two-bedroom unit Charles had insisted she accept after the mezzanine project wrapped. Sunlight streamed through sheer curtains, painting the walls in soft gold. On the dresser sat the silver key to the Carter Resilience Center, and beside it, a narrower velvet box she hadn't opened yet. Today she would. She padded into the kitchenette, finding Lily already at the table, legs swinging, practicing her wedding speech between bites of cereal. And Grandma taught me that violins speak emotion. And Mr. Charles taught me how to tie a bow tie on YouTube. Oh, good morning. Grace kissed the top of her head. Big day, little bean. Bigger than the whole tower, Lily declared, slurping milk. Nurse Tiffany's braiding my hair at 9. You need breakfast. She pointed to a plate covered in foil. Underneath waited a single pancake shaped like a heart, slightly lopsided but dusted with powdered sugar. Grace's chest tightened with gratitude for 8-year-old devotion. As they ate, her phone pinged. A text from Margaret, hairstylist in conference room B at 10:00. Don't argue, my wedding gift. Grace chuckled and typed back a heart emoji. Meanwhile, on the 49th floor, Charles stood before a full-length mirror adjusting pearlescent cufflinks. The custom tuxedo fit like it had been waiting in a closet since his youth. Yet he felt strangely 25. On a side table rested a blue velvet pouch containing Elena's wedding ring. He would carry it inside his jacket, close to his heart, to honor the continuum rather than erase it. Margaret bustled in, tape measure dangling from her neck even on her day off. Boutonniere delivery, she announced, pinning a single sprig of lilac to his lapel. Her eyes turned misty. Never thought I'd see this day. Charles smiled. Neither did I. Ready for your role? She squared her shoulders. Mother of the board, always. They laughed, an inside joke referencing how she corralled directors into approving every dreamy deviation since Grace's arrival. First look. The plan was simple: meet in the recital hall, quiet, intimate before facing the rooftop crowd. Grace arrived first, violin case in hand, wearing an ivory tea-length dress with lace sleeves, stitched by the same payroll supervisor who'd refashioned stage curtains for the gala. Around her neck glinted the silver key and, newly added, a pendant containing a pinch of Samuel's guitar pick shading so both of her past loves would accompany her into the next measure. She paced the stage, nerves prickling, then footsteps. Charles entered, tuxedo crisp, eyes luminous. He stopped, struck silent. A lifetime of contracts and negotiations could not equip him for the sight of Grace in bridal light. She broke the hush. You clean up well, Mr. Bennett. He chuckled, voice thick. And you dissolve worlds, Ms. Carter. They met halfway, fingers entwining instinctively. No grand kiss yet, saving that for the ceremony, just foreheads touching, breaths mingling. Grace stepped back, lifted the violin. I have something for you. Charles raised a brow. She began to play the opening bars of Debussy's Clair de Lune, which he had stumbled through months earlier on the unfinished auditorium piano. Her bow coaxed moonlight into morning, each note a whispered vow. Charles closed his eyes, letting the melody stitch present to future. When the last harmonic faded, he opened them, tears glistening. She lowered the violin. Thank you for giving me a stage again. He kissed her knuckles. Thank you for turning my empire into music. Rooftop transformation. By midday, the sky garden had transformed into an aerial chapel. Rows of wooden chairs faced a small platform framed by lilac bushes now in full purple flourish. Instead of an aisle runner, Lily had laid a path of colorful gears, plastic cogs from the maker's lab sprayed silver and dusted with biodegradable glitter. Each gear represented a volunteer who helped build the Resilience Center. Guests filed in, custodians wearing pressed shirts, investors sporting floral dresses instead of power suits. City officials, community kids clutching DIY confetti poppers. The air smelled of lilac and bakery fresh cinnamon rolls, a nod to the apartment above the bakery where Grace and Samuel had once lived. The officiant, Judge Beverly Klein, who had presided over the custody hearing, stood ready, robe exchanged for a lavender pantsuit. She accepted the invitation with a note, some govels strike happier chords. Processional. A string quartet of Bennett employees began Pahelbel Cannon, but with a twist. The cellist was a security guard, the violist a marketing intern, united by Resilience Center music classes. First down the gear patch came Margaret escorting Lily, both beaming. Lily wore a knee-length dress the color of sunrise and carried a basket of lilac petals. Guests awed as Lily paused to sprinkle petals, then added her own flair, tossing a handful of tiny metallic bolts among them. For sturdy love, she stage whispered, causing laughter. Next, Grace appeared on the stair landing, arm-linked with Jorge Martinez. The luthier who revived her violin. She asked him to walk her down the aisle, honoring the craft that restrung her life. Charles watched, heart quaking. When Grace reached the platform, Jorge kissed her cheek and joined the front row. She turned to see Charles stepping forward from the opposite side. Escorted by Judith Crane, board chair turned steadfast ally. Judge Klein cleared her throat, voice amplified softly through hidden speakers. Friends and family, we gather on this rooftop, once merely a vantage point, now a living garden, to witness vows that prove it is never too late to bloom. She invited Lily to stand beside her grandparents. Lily straightened her posture, gripping a laminated note tiered. Vows. Charles began. Grace, you arrived in my life like sunrise through boardroom blinds. You taught me that spreadsheets lack the rows for courage and the columns for compassion. I promise to keep building spaces where unseen hearts can be seen, and to hold your hand while we cross every new threshold. A breeze fluttered the page Grace unfolded. Charles, you saw the music in my silence. You opened doors to a future I'd locked away. I promise to share every note, joyful or dissonant, and to polish the world beside you until it shines for those who come after. Lily cleared her throat, eyes darting across the note. And I vow to remind you both to eat vegetables, take dance breaks, and never forget that inventions and songs change the world only when shared. Also, thank you for showing me grown-ups can learn new things. I love you. The audience melted into applause. Judge Klein smiled. Rings? Margaret produced a tiny mechanical box Lily had designed. When opened, miniature gears rotated to reveal 2 rings. Charles slipped a simple platinum band onto Grace's finger. She reciprocated with a titanium ring etched with violin holes and, inside, the engraved words still playing. With the power vested in me by the state of Illinois and the boundless realm of second chances, Judge Klein declared, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Charles dipped Grace in a gentle, laughter-filled kiss. Cameras clicked, but no photograph could capture the seismic tenderness radiating from that embrace. Reception. Tables draped in linen circled the lilac bushes. Centerpieces were mason jars filled with gears and blossoms, symbolizing the marriage of mechanics and music. The menu featured soul-warming fair chicken pot pie, Grace a specialty, and vegetable lasagna, Charles a late-night comfort food. A cupcake tower replaced a formal cake, each frosted with edible violets. Speeches flowed. Margaret toasted the couple's efficiency of heart. Greer, surprisingly sentimental after 2 glasses of sparkling cider, admitted, culture is our most profitable asset. He earned applause and a teasing elbow from Judith. Then Lily took the mic, presenting the surprise slideshow. A screen unfurled against a wall, projecting photos set to a recording of Grace's violin students playing Here Comes the Sun. Images showed Bennett Tower's transformation, Lily walking into the CEO's office, Grace polishing floors, Charles visiting the hospital, the first rooftop concert, the mezzanine construction, the gala, the courtroom victory, the maker's lab bustling with kids, culminating in a photo taken that morning, Grace and Charles holding hands under sunrise. Tears sparkled across the crowd. When the music ended, Guests sprang into a standing ovation directed not just at the newlyweds but at the collective journey. First dance. Instead of a DSE, Charles sat at the grand piano rolled onto the deck. He played the three-chord progression he'd practiced for months. Grace joined with her violin, weaving a lyrical line over his accompaniment. Their duet morphed into an impromptu jam session. The security Ellis joined, then the guitar custodians, then kids from the Maker's Lab tapping rhythms on overturned paint buckets. Soon, adults and children alike swayed beneath twinkling bulbs, hideous gleaming beyond. Under the music, Charles whispered to Grace, "Elena's ring is over my heart today. I think she approves." Grace pressed her palm to his chest. "I know she does. Samuel's pick is close to mine." Music resounded, then softened into lingering chords. Applause echoed against glass walls. Fireworks from a nearby festival unexpectedly burst over the lake, painting the night in glittering trails. Lily squealed, "They re for you," and no one corrected her. Quiet moments. Later, while guests refilled lemonade jars and kids chased bubbles, Grace slipped away to a balcony overlooking the city lights. Charles found her there, shawl wrapped against the cool night. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "I used to stare at this skyline during overnight shifts," she said. "All that life happening beyond the glass. Now it feels like part of our living room." He leaned on the rail. "Funny how distance shrinks when doors open." She smiled. "What is our next door?" He produced an envelope, a board-approved expansion to a second resilience center in Detroit. "They want us to spearhead it." Her eyes widened. "More dreams to build. With you as architect of hearts," he said. She tucked the envelope into her shawl. "Then let us start with a honeymoon 2 weeks. No blueprints, no budget sheets. Where to?" She thought a moment. "Someplace with lilacs and jazz. New Orleans." "Done," he said, sealing the pact with a kiss. Farewell lanterns. As the reception wound down, Lily distributed paper lanterns equipped with LED candles, eco-friendly and safe for city skies. Guests wrote wishes on the lanterns, promises to volunteer, to mentor, to forgive themselves for lost time. Charles and Grace wrote a shared vow: keep building hope. At the count of 3, lanterns ascended, bobbing like gentle planets against the dark. From below, on sidewalks and balconies, strangers looked up, momentarily connected to a rooftop they couldn't see. Grace watched one lantern drift higher. "That one is Samuel's," she murmured, "and Elena's." Charles squeezed her waist. "Guiding stars." Last guests. By midnight, only a handful remained, Margaret gathering leftover cupcakes for tomorrow's breakfast meeting. Jorge packing the string instruments, Greer Ty loosened chatting with a custodian about gardening tips. Lily, wrapped in a blanket, blinked sleepily from a deck chair. Charles crouched beside her, bedtime project manager. She yawned. "Best project ever." He scooped her up. Grace followed, hand in his. They stepped into the elevator. As doors slid shut, Grace glanced back at the empty rooftop where fairy lights still glowed. Lilacs swayed and echoes of music lingered in night air. "Feels like leaving a dream," she whispered. "We're retaking it with us," Charles replied. Epilogue. Days later, a photograph of the rooftop wedding landed on the cover of a major business magazine. The headline, "From balance sheets to wedding beats, how compassion reshaped a corporation." Analysts argued over whether empathy was a replicable strategy, but inside Bennett Tower, metrics no longer told the entire story. In the mezzanine resilience center, a new plaque appeared in celebration of springtime vows. "May every project bloom with love," and beneath it, a quote chosen by Lily, "Dreams aren't rescued, they reinvited." Grace resumed teaching violin on Wednesday nights, wedding ring glinting under fluorescent lights. Charles attended every class, fumbling on a borrowed cello, laughing at his own squeaks. Lily engineered a mini robot that handed out rosin cakes to each student. Outside, lilac petals drifted on the breeze, carpeting sidewalks and lavender confetti long after the wedding ended. Passersby paused, noticing the fragrance, perhaps wondering what celebration had taken place overhead. They couldn't know the full tale, but they sensed something uplifting had happened. Something that might ripple into their own chances at renewal. And so, on a rooftop garden overlooking a city perpetually under construction, 2 souls who had spent most of their lives surviving finally exhaled into thriving, vowing not just to love each other, but to keep opening doors for everyone still waiting in the hallway of possibility. In the hush that followed promises and petals, the tower stood a little taller, not because steel had stretched, but because hearts within it had. And when spring returned the next year, the lilacs bloomed earlier than ever, as if eager to honor vows spoken under their watch. Vows that prove seasons can turn second chances into everlasting spring.